Let's slow things down. You don't have to listen too closely, just let your mind wander while we talk about something incredibly unimportant. And if you feel like these videos are of any use to you, then you can like and subscribe, but only if you really feel like it. And now, let's begin. If you ever thought medieval Europe was all about knights in shining armour and damsels in distress, then buckle up. We're diving into the more shadowy side of the medieval tapestry, where life's grittier realities played out. Welcome to the bustling, noisy streets of a medieval city, where the air is thick with the smell of roasting meats, the clang of blacksmiths at work, and yes, the whispered negotiations of the world's oldest profession. Medieval prostitutes, or ladies of the night, as some might romantically call them, were far from just footnotes in history. They were a necessity, a tolerated part of urban existence, and their lives were as complex as the cathedrals towering over them. Let's set the scene. It's the 14th century, a time when Europe is a patchwork of kingdoms, principalities, and city-states, each with its own rules and customs. The economy is buzzing like a beehive, but it's not all honey. For many, life is a game of survival. Enter the women who found their footing in the cobblestone labyrinth of city streets, where prostitution was not only common but, in some ways, regulated like any other trade. Cities like London, Paris and Florence had designated areas for these activities, often under the watchful eye of local authorities who understood the economic benefits of keeping such trades in check. Speaking of economics, let's talk numbers. A medieval prostitute could earn more in a day than a labourer might in a week. While a skilled craftsman might bring home a shilling or two, a prostitute's earnings typically range from 1 to 2 shillings per client. Now, this wasn't just spare change. It was enough to keep the proverbial wolves at bay. For many women, this was the ticket to relative independence, a rare commodity in an age dominated by patriarchal norms. But how did one end up in this line of work? Necessity, mostly. In an era with limited job opportunities for women, especially those on the lower rungs of society, prostitution offered a way to earn a living. Widows, orphans, and women who found themselves without familial support often turned to this profession. It wasn't always a last resort. For some, it was an act of choice given the constraints they faced. Let's not forget the societal pressures and the church's conflicting stance, tolerated yet condemned. It's a bit of a mixed message, like being told to eat your vegetables while they cover your plate in chocolate. Now, working conditions. Definitely not the romanticized courtesan life you might see in movies. The reality was far less glamorous and more about dodging the daily hazards. Brothels, often situated in the seedier parts of town, were the workplace of choice for many. But these weren't the plush establishments of later centuries, picture-cramped rooms, straw mattresses, and the ever-present risk of disease. The Black Death, anyone? Yet, for all its dangers, a brothel offered a measure of protection from the law and sometimes even from unruly clients. Regulations were a constant presence, with city officials and the church both having a say. In many places, prostitutes had to adhere to specific dress codes designed to mark them out from respectable women. Think of it as a medieval uniform, except instead of a badge, you got a particular style of clothing or colour. In Paris, for instance, prostitutes were often required to wear a striped hood. In some towns, they couldn't wear fur or silk. Those fabrics were reserved for the upper crust. Imagine trying to stand out in an era where fashion was as much about status as it was about keeping warm. The church, ever the enforcer of moral codes, had a complicated relationship with prostitution. On one hand, it was seen as a sin. On the other, it was begrudgingly accepted as a necessary evil. The logic was something like this. Better the men visit brothels than corrupt the wives and daughters of good, God-fearing citizens. A twisted kind of moral arithmetic if there ever was one. Sermons often railed against the immorality of it all, yet some convents would take in former prostitutes, offering them a chance at redemption. Medieval prostitution wasn't just a job, it was a complex social institution, woven into the very fabric of urban life. It intersected with economics, politics, and religion in ways that might seem paradoxical today. It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white. More often, it's as muddy as the streets of a medieval town after a summer rain. So, as you wander these historical byways, remember that behind every legend there's a reality that paints a fuller, perhaps grittier, picture of the past. So, let's dive into the daily grind of a medieval prostitute. Forget any notions of leisurely mornings and breakfast in bed. We're talking about an era where personal time was as rare as a unicorn sighting. Our medieval dame of the night, or perhaps day, would rise early, often in a crowded brothel or a dingy rented room. The city bustled with the sound of merchants setting up their stalls and the daily clatter of horse-drawn carts. An alarm clock, courtesy of medieval life. Starting her day, she'd likely perform the basic hygiene rituals of the time, which, let's be honest, were about as effective as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. Water wasn't always clean, and soap was a luxury. But cleanliness was crucial, not just for attracting clients, but for keeping the plague at bay. As for breakfast, it wasn't a lavish affair. Think more along the lines of a stale loaf and possibly some ale. It was a carbohydrate-heavy start designed to fuel long hours. Now, depending on her workplace, a brothel or the street, her routine would differ. If she was in a brothel, she had the dubious comfort of a roof over her head. These establishments were often run by madams who were the original tough-as-nails businesswomen. They'd ensure the ladies had clients lined up, although this service came with a hefty cut of the earnings. In a brothel, work was as structured as any medieval guild, with set hours and a schedule that resembled a modern-day shift pattern. These women were pioneers of the gig economy, minus the apps and ratings. And then there were the streetwalkers who faced a more unpredictable day. They'd claim their territory around popular spots, markets, near taverns or the fringes of town, where foot traffic meant potential customers. Here, negotiation was an art form. Prices weren't set in stone, and haggling was part of the business. A service might go for a shilling or two, but the final figure depended on the client's negotiating skills and the desperation or savvy of the seller. Economic transactions were as much about survival as they were about profit. Every deal struck was a delicate dance balance too far in one direction, and the whole endeavour could collapse. Historical records, like those from the court cases of the time, show us that disputes over such transactions weren't uncommon. If a client failed to pay, the consequences could range from a simple argument to a brawl in the street. Logistics were another daily challenge. The ladies had to be mobile and discreet, able to pack up and move at a moment's notice if the local authorities decided today was the day to enforce laws that had been ignored for months. This was a world where the law was a fickle friend, and bribes could turn a blind eye quicker than you'd think. The physical toll of the work was staggering. Hours spent in cramped, unsanitary conditions took a toll on the body. Disease was a constant threat, and medical care was primitive at best, more likely to involve leeches than any real relief. Yet, despite the hardships, there was a resilience here that's hard not to admire. These women were navigating a world that offered them few choices, and they did it with a tenacity that's both awe-inspiring and heartbreaking. If we peel back the layers of romanticism, what emerges is a stark portrait of medieval life. It's a reminder that while we may fantasize about the past, the reality was often harsher than our dreams. But the human spirit, in all its flawed glory, finds a way to endure. So, as we continue our journey into this vibrant, gritty world, let's keep an eye out for the resilience and resourcefulness that kept these women going against the odds. The story's far from over, and the echoes of the past have a way of reverberating into the present. As we tread further into the labyrinth of medieval life, it's time to unravel the intricate social dynamics that surrounded the women of the night. These ladies, caught in a web of societal norms, were often seen as both villainous temptresses and necessary evils, a paradox if there ever was one. While society wagged its finger, it also crafted laws that inadvertently offered a shield of sorts, albeit one with plenty of holes. First off, let's talk about the stigmas these women faced on a daily basis. In the grand medieval social hierarchy, prostitutes were cast to the bottom, sharing the rung with other undesirable professions. Yet, despite the disdain, they were a fixture of urban life, much like the muddy streets and crowded markets. The church and the state were often on the same page here. Prostitution was sinful, but also a pragmatic solution. The logic was, well, twisted. Better to have a designated group of women to fulfill needs, rather than risk the sanctity of marriage. A classic case of do as I say, not as I do. Yet within the stigma lay a strange form of protection. Enter the legal system, stage left. Cities like Augsburg and Nuremberg had brothel ordinances that, interestingly enough, regulated the trade. these laws were a double-edged sword. On one hand, they allowed women some degree of safety by confining work to certain areas and ensuring a modicum of order. On the other, they reinforced societal stigmas, marking these women as other by law. It's worth noting that in some places, brothel owners were required to be licensed, much like tavern keepers or merchants. So, while society frowned upon them, it also acknowledged their economic importance. A contradiction that would win medals if mental gymnastics were a medieval sport. Now, let's dive into the relationships these women had with their clients, brothel owners, and the long arm of the law. Clients ranged from the average John Doe to the more affluent members of society. And let's not kid ourselves, these men came from all walks of life. Nobles, merchants, soldiers. Even clergy, despite their vows of chastity, were sometimes known to partake. The interaction was transactional, but it was also a dance of power. The women wielded a certain degree of control during negotiations, though this was often precarious. Each encounter was a gamble, where the stakes were as high as a medieval tower. Brothel owners were the CEOs of this underground economy. Often women themselves, these madams were shrewd business people. They negotiated rents with property owners, managed the books, and, crucially, dealt with law enforcement. Their relationships with the women in their employ were complex, part mentor, part enforcer. The madams were the gatekeepers of a world where loyalty was a currency as valuable as silver. And speaking of silver, let's not forget the role of money in all this. Economics was the engine driving this whole endeavour. Brothels paid taxes, often quite significant ones, to the city. It's estimated that in some places the revenue generated from this trade contributed significantly to the city coffers. Imagine that. A profession so vilified, yet so crucial to the economic fabric. It's the kind of irony that's more delicious than a medieval feast. Then there were the watchmen, the keepers of the peace, or chaos, depending on the day. Their relationship with prostitutes was a complicated one. On paper, they were supposed to enforce laws against solicitation. In reality, they often turned a blind eye so long as their palms were greased. Bribery was the unspoken rule, and these under-the-table deals were as much a part of daily life as the ringing of church bells. It's a reminder that corruption isn't a modern invention, it's an age-old tradition. Yet, despite these layers of protection, vulnerability was never far away. The threat of violence was a constant shadow, lurking in the alleyways and behind closed doors. Physical assault was not uncommon, and the law's response was often tepid at best. When disputes did reach the courts, the scales rarely tipped in favour of the women. This imbalance of power was a bitter reality, one that underscores the precariousness of their existence. But if you think these women were mere victims, think again. They were survivors in a world that offered them little else. They navigated the social labyrinth with a cunning that would make Machiavelli proud. They understood the game and played it with an expertise born of necessity. In an era when women's voices were often silenced, they found ways to be heard, even if it was through whispers and negotiations. So, as we continue to peel back the layers of this complex tapestry, remember that these women were not just pawns in a patriarchal game. They were players, with agency and resilience, navigating the murky waters of medieval society with a tenacity that's both impressive and poignant. The story doesn't end here. It's a saga that ripples through history, a testament to the enduring human spirit in all its flawed, resilient glory. As we delve deeper, keep your eyes peeled for the nuances and contradictions that make history as rich and complex as the people who lived it. And speaking of the complexities of medieval society, let's pivot to how prostitution shaped the very cities where it thrived. Picture this. Medieval urban centres like Paris and London were like a medieval version of Sim City, with their own set of peculiar zoning laws and population dynamics. These cities weren't just dealing with unruly knights and market brawls. They were grappling with how to integrate, regulate, and, yes, profit from the world's oldest profession. In the bustling streets of Paris, the influence of prostitution was as tangible as the cobblestones underfoot. These women didn't just work under the radar, they were woven into the urban fabric. The city authorities, ever the pragmatists, knew that trying to banish prostitution outright was like trying to catch the wind. Instead, they created designated areas, what we might romantically call red light districts. But let's clear something up. These weren't some neon-lit boulevards of vice. Think more along the lines of a few streets, deliberately tucked away, where the trades could flourish with a semblance of oversight. And why not? The municipal coffers were hungry beasts. The taxes and fines collected from brothels were a non-negligible slice of the city's revenue pie. In 14th century Paris, the city took a cut from each transaction, a kind of medieval VAT on vice. It's estimated that such levies contributed significantly to urban development projects, from repairing city walls to maintaining public baths. Talk about a fiscal irony, moral outrage funding public infrastructure. Across the Channel, in London, the scenario was strikingly similar. Southwark, just across the river from the city proper, became a notorious hub for the trade, often under the protection of powerful ecclesiastical figures. Yes, you heard that right. The Bishop of Winchester, for instance, had jurisdiction over this area, collecting rents from the brothels. Apparently, the good bishop had a keen eye for both souls and silver. It turns out that sin, when managed well, was quite the lucrative enterprise. But these districts weren't just about economics. They were social pressure valves, a pragmatic solution to the otherwise explosive mix of young men, booze, and boredom. By confining prostitution to certain areas, city officials hoped to keep the rest of the town respectable, or at least respectably hypocritical. It's a bit like having a junk drawer in your kitchen. You know where the mess is, and it's comforting to pretend the rest of the house is in order. Now, let's not gloss over the grim realities. The conditions in these districts were often dire, and the risk of disease was as constant as the ringing of church bells. Public health, or what passed for it in those days, was a growing concern. The spread of sexually transmitted infections was a public health issue before the term even existed. City officials, recognizing the threat, began to impose health regulations on brothels. In some places, women were required to undergo regular health checks. Not exactly the kind of wellness program you'd boast about, but a step in the right direction nonetheless. This leads us to the church's role in this tangled web. If you're imagining the church as a monolithic entity of piety and chastity, think again. The church was a complex bureaucracy, and its relationship with prostitution was as paradoxical as a cat chasing its tail. Officially, prostitution was a sin, a stain on the moral fabric. Unofficially, however, it was a tolerated sin, a lesser evil that kept greater ones at bay. Theologians of the time, like Thomas Aquinas, argued that prostitution was a necessary evil, a way to preserve the virtue of respectable women. It's a moral calculus as convoluted as a medieval tapestry. Yet, the church wasn't just sitting idly by. Institutions like the Magdalen houses emerged, offering refuge and redemption to former prostitutes. These convent-like establishments provided a path back to respectability, though not without strings attached. Here, women were expected to renounce their past lives and embrace a life of penance. Redemption, it seems, was a full-time job, but let's not romanticize these institutions. While they offered sanctuary, they were also tools of control, reinforcing the societal narrative that women's value lay in their purity. It was a carrot-and-stick approach, with the church wielding both with equal fervour. A woman could find salvation, but only if she adhered to a strict moral code, penned by those who likely never faced her struggles. In this medieval dance of morality, economics, and urban planning, prostitution was the thread that tied disparate elements together. It influenced city layouts, filled public coffers, and shaped policies that echoed through the centuries. Yet, it also exposed the hypocrisies of a society that condemned what it could not live without. It's a reminder that history, much like life, is rarely neat and tidy. It's a tangle of contradictions, where the sacred and the profane coexist in a delicate balance. As we delve deeper into this shadowy world, keep an eye out for the intersections and ironies that make history as rich and complex as the cobblestones of a medieval street. The tale isn't over. There are more layers to uncover, more myths to bust, and more truths to reveal. In the grand tapestry of time, this is but one thread, but it's one that tells a story as enduring as the cities where it once thrived. So stay tuned, because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that the past has a way of echoing into the present, challenging us to see the world anew. And so, as history's tapestry unfurls its final threads, we find ourselves staring at the legacy of medieval prostitution, a legacy that isn't just a footnote, but a full chapter in the story of human resilience and societal hypocrisy. You see, the The medieval sex trade was more than just a murky corner of history. It was a driving force that shaped the cities, economies, and moral codes that would echo through the ages. It's time to dust off those rose-tinted spectacles and take a hard look at how this shadowy profession left its mark on the world. First off, let's talk about perceptions. The medieval prostitute's image has been tossed around like a political football for centuries. On one hand, there's the romanticized vision of the sultry courtesan weaving her charm in candlelit rooms. On the other, there's the demonized figure of the harlot, forever cursed and condemned. But the truth, as always, dances somewhere in between. These women were survivors, navigating a world where societal norms were as rigid as a knight's armor. Their reality was less about romance and more about grit, a daily grind that required savvy negotiation skills and a stomach for the grimier aspects of life. Yet, despite the stigma, these women were indispensable to the urban economy. They were the unsung cogs in the medieval machine, contributing to the financial lifeblood of cities like London and Paris. Think about it. The taxes they paid helped build roads, maintain public buildings, and even fund the occasional royal banquet. In some cities, the income from brothels was so significant that officials turned a blind eye to the moral quandaries, choosing instead to focus on the clinking of coins. It's a testament to the power of pragmatism over piety. And this economic necessity wasn't just confined to medieval times. The foundations laid in those cobblestone streets paved the way for future generations. As societies evolved, so did the legal framework surrounding the sex trade. The regulations first seen in the medieval era, like brothel zoning and health checks, set precedents that would echo into modern times. Today, debates about the legalization and regulation of sex work continue to reference these historical practices, underscoring how deeply entrenched this profession is in our social fabric. But what about the women themselves? Their legacy is one of resilience, a testament to the enduring human spirit in the face of adversity. They carved out spaces for themselves in a world that offered them little. They were the original hustlers, operating in a system stacked against them, yet finding ways to not just survive, but sometimes even thrive. Their stories are reminders of the tenacity required to navigate a society that often saw them as both indispensable and invisible. And let's not forget the social dynamics they navigated. These women were often at the mercy of laws and societal norms that sought to control them, yet they wielded a quiet power. In a society that silenced women, they found ways to make their voices heard, even if it was through whispered negotiations and strategic alliances. Their existence challenged the very fabric of the patriarchy, forcing it to confront its own contradictions. For every law that sought to control them, there was a woman who found a way to circumvent it. The Church, too, played its part in this complex dance. It condemned the sin but acknowledged its necessity, a paradox that would make even the most seasoned theologian's head spin. This duality is a reminder of the Church's own struggles with morality and pragmatism, a balancing act that continues to this day. Medieval prostitution, then, wasn't just a social institution, it was a mirror reflecting the hypocrisies of a society that couldn't live with it, yet couldn't live without it. In the end, the legacy of medieval prostitution is a multifaceted one. It's a story of economic necessity, social stigma, and human resilience. It's a tale as old as time, reminding us that beneath the layers of history lies a core of gritty reality. These women, often relegated to the shadows, were pivotal players in a game that shaped the world as we know it. So, the next time you stroll through the streets of an ancient city, spare a thought for these unsung heroines whose stories are woven into the very fabric of history. They were more than just figures in a dusty ledger. They were architects of their own destinies, leaving behind a legacy that continues to shape the world today. In a world where philosophy was as much about survival as it was about wisdom, ancient China stood out like the original TED Talk. Imagine a time when the biggest distraction wasn't social media, but surviving the next dynasty shift. We're diving into a land where philosophy wasn't just an academic afterthought, but the cornerstone of governance, society, and personal conduct. Welcome to the era of Confucius, Laozi, and Han Feizi, where the debate wasn't about who had the best ideas, but who had the best ideas for not getting your head chopped off. Let's start with Confucius, born in 551 BC in the state of Lu. Imagine him as the original multi-hyphenate, philosopher, teacher, and yes, tax collector. Because, guess what? even the greatest minds needed to pay the rent. Confucius was the ultimate pragmatist, balancing the books by day and pondering the moral fabric of society by night. He lived during the spring and autumn period, a time when China was less a unified nation and more a jigsaw puzzle of states vying for dominance. If you think modern politics is a mess, try navigating a landscape with over 100 warlords, each claiming a slice of the Middle Kingdom. Confucius wasn't just about spouting wisdom like some ancient fortune cookie. His teachings, later compiled in the Analects, focused on social harmony and the importance of personal and governmental morality. Think of him as the original life coach, but with a heavy emphasis on filial piety and ritual. He championed the idea of the junzi, or gentleman, a person of noble conduct, which might sound quaint until you realize it was a subtle dig at the ruling elites who acted like toddlers with swords. Meanwhile, over in the realm of Taoism, Laozi was spinning a different kind of wisdom. Laozi, or Old Master, was supposedly born in 604 BC, though, like any good enigmatic figure, details about his life are murky at best. Legend has it he was born an old man, and while that might sound like something out of a fantasy novel, it's a fitting metaphor for a philosophy that embraces the paradoxes of life. His seminal work, the Tao Te Ching, is a mere 5,000 characters, but packs a philosophical punch heavier than a sumo wrestler. Taoism is all about the Tao, or way, a concept so fluid that trying to pin it down is like nailing jelly to a wall. It's about embracing simplicity, spontaneity, and the natural order, a perfect antidote to the bureaucratic nightmares of the time. And then there's legalism, the no-nonsense, buzzkill cousin of Chinese philosophy. Legalism, championed by figures like Han Feizi in the 3rd century BC, was the tough love approach to governance. Forget moral virtue or cosmic harmony, legalism was about strict laws and harsh punishments. Think of it as the philosophy that would have made Machiavelli blush. Legalists believed that humans were inherently selfish and short-sighted, and the only way to maintain order was through an iron-fisted government. In the turbulent Warring States period, when kingdoms fell faster than celebrity marriages, this approach was, unfortunately, quite appealing. So why did these philosophies matter? Well, they weren't just intellectual exercises. They were the frameworks that shaped Chinese society for millennia. Confucianism influenced everything from family structure to imperial exams, while Taoism seeped into Chinese art, medicine, and even martial arts. Legalism, meanwhile, laid the groundwork for the Qin dynasty's unification of China, albeit with a body count that would make a Game of Thrones episode look tame. It's easy to romanticize these ancient philosophies, imagining wise sages dispensing pearls of wisdom in misty mountains. But let's not forget the gritty reality. Confucius's daily grind as a civil servant, Taoism's roots in a chaotic, war-torn landscape, and legalism's brutal pragmatism in a world where the next invasion could be just around the corner. These philosophies weren't born out of peaceful contemplation, but were forged in the crucible of conflict and necessity. So, as we delve deeper into these schools of thought over the coming sections, keep in mind the world they emerge from. A world where philosophy was not just a path to enlightenment, but a survival strategy in a time when the next dynasty could rise or fall at the flick of a sword. It's a testament to the enduring power of ideas and the wisdom of those who dare to think differently in an age when doing so could cost you more than just a few followers. As we wade deeper into the murky waters of ancient Chinese philosophy, it's time to shine a spotlight on the granddaddy of them all, Confucianism. Now, let's set the scene. Imagine if Instagram influencer culture met the ancient world. Confucius had followers, not in the double digits, but in the thousands, without a single hashtag in sight. Yes, Confucius was no hermit scribbling away in solitude. He was more of a philosophical rock star with a posse of 3,000 disciples. That's a fan base larger than some indie bands today, minus the tour bus and pyrotechnics. Confucius, or Master Kong, if you're on a first-name basis, was a man with a mission. His teachings, immortalized in the Analects, are a collection of pithy sayings and dialogues that read like an ancient Twitter feed. But don't be fooled by their apparent simplicity. These nuggets pack more philosophical punch than a heavyweight championship. At their core, the Analects revolve around humanity, or Ren, and the idea of proper conduct, both personal and political. It's like he was trying to teach a nation how to adult properly, One of Confucius's most talked about obsessions was with rituals and manners, which might sound like Grandma's handbook on how to host Thanksgiving dinner. But these weren't just empty gestures. They were the social glue that held the chaotic fabric of the spring and autumn period together. Rituals were a way to bring order to a world that was about as stable as a house of cards during an earthquake. Confucius saw them as the embodiment of respect and hierarchy, essential for maintaining harmony in a society where everyone had a designated slot, like pieces in a cosmic chess game. Now, if you're picturing Confucius as some kind of kindly old sage dispensing wisdom from a mountaintop, it's time for a reality check. The real Confucius was a hustler, a man on a mission to spread his teachings far and wide across the war-torn landscape of ancient China. He trekked from state to state, often facing rejection from rulers who were more interested in military might than moral virtue. It was like trying to sell yoga mats at a heavy metal concert. His ideas were a hard sell in a world obsessed with power and conquest. Despite the challenges, Confucius's relentless dedication paid off. His disciples were like the original street team, spreading the word in an era where viral meant something entirely different. These followers weren't just passive listeners. They were active participants, debating, interpreting, and expanding on his ideas. Confucius's classroom was less a lecture hall and more a lively forum, echoing with the sounds of intellectual sparring. It was a think tank on steroids, and it laid the groundwork for what would become a cornerstone of Chinese society for centuries to come. But let's not romanticize this too much. For all his philosophical prowess, Confucius was also a man of his time, deeply rooted in the patriarchal norms of ancient China. His emphasis on filial piety might sound quaint today, but back then it was a revolutionary concept that placed family loyalty above all else. Imagine a world where your parents weren't just your elders, but your moral compass, GPS, and social security rolled into one. Confucius elevated the family unit to near-sacred status, a move that would resonate through the ages in every Confucian society. Yet, like every great figure, Confucius's legacy is a mixed bag. His ideas on hierarchy and respect have been criticized for reinforcing social stratification and stifling innovation. The myth of Confucius as a solitary sage is a romanticized notion that obscures the real hustle of a man who was as much a marketer as he was a philosopher. He was a man who understood the value of networking long before LinkedIn made it cool. In the end, Confucius was more than just a philosopher. He was a visionary who saw the potential for a better world through improved human conduct. His teachings, though born out of a tumultuous era, have transcended time, influencing not just the East, but the entire globe. So next time you hear someone quote Confucius, remember, behind those wise words was a man who was part philosopher, part motivational speaker, and part relentless entrepreneur, navigating a world as complex and chaotic as our own. And that, dear friends, is the real Confucius, warts, wisdom, and all. And now we swivel from Confucius's bustling classroom to a figure who might have been the original proponent of remote work, Laozi. In an era when trekking across states was as common as your morning commute, Laozi supposedly rode off into the sunset on a water buffalo, leaving behind a philosophical legacy as bewildering and profound as an internet meme. Welcome to Taoism, where life's ultimate hack is to stop trying so hard. Let's talk about Laozi, or Old Master, as he's affectionately known. Born around 604 BC, though some claim he was more myth than man, a kind of philosophical Bigfoot. His biography is so sketchy, it makes a CIA dossier look like an open book. Legend has it, he was born with white hair, already embodying the wisdom of a seasoned sage. While that sounds like someone's convenient way to skip baby photos, it captures the essence of Taoism, embracing the paradoxical and the mysterious. The Tao Te Ching, his supposed magnum opus, is a 5,000-character riddle wrapped in an enigma, a text that's been translated more times than a pop song. It's like finding enlightenment in a series of Zen tweets. But let's not get too mystical here. The Tao Te Ching is a cornerstone of Taoism, a philosophy that says, hey, maybe stop overthinking everything. It champions the Tao, or Way, an elusive force that, like a good Wi-Fi connection, is all around us but hard to pin down. It's about living in harmony with the universe, and is the perfect philosophical excuse to dodge unnecessary meetings. Talk about life goals. Now, was Laozi a real person, or a collective pen name for a bunch of ancient free thinkers who preferred enlightenment over empire building? It's a debate that could make your head spin faster than a game of philosophical twister. Some scholars argue that Laozi could have been multiple authors, which, if true, makes the Tao Te Ching the ultimate ancient writer's room. Others suggest he was a rebel philosopher, rejecting the growing bureaucracy of the Zhou dynasty like a bohemian opting out of corporate life. Regardless of his origins, Laozi's influence is as real as the sky is blue. The Tao Te Ching's appeal lies in its simplicity and profound depth, making it a go-to guide for anyone overburdened by the complexities of life. Its teachings promote wu wei, or non-action, a principle that sounds like the dream job description, until you realize it's about aligning with life's natural ebb and flow, not just binge-watching your favorite series. The idea is to act in accordance with the Tao, allowing things to unfold naturally without force or struggle. It's like the universe's version of letting go of the steering wheel and trusting the journey. Now, before we get too lost in the clouds, let's address the economic and social backdrop against which Taoism emerged. The spring and autumn period was not exactly a walk in the park. Picture a landscape fractured by constant warfare, where survival often depended on shifting alliances and cunning strategies. In such a turbulent era, the Taoist ideal of non-interference was as revolutionary as it was appealing. While rulers were busy sharpening swords and raising armies, Taoism whispered a counter-narrative, that true power lay in peace and balance, not control and conquest. Taoism also offered a balm to the bureaucratic headaches of the time. As the Zhou dynasty's administrative apparatus grew as intricate as a 1,000-piece puzzle, those disillusioned by its red tape found solace in Taoism's promise of simplicity and spontaneity. It was the philosophical equivalent of Marie Kondo in your life, minus the emphasis on tidying up your sock drawer. And here's where the Tao really shines, in its application to everyday life. While Confucius was busy crafting the blueprint for society's moral conduct, Taoism sneakily seeped into China's cultural fabric, influencing everything from medicine to martial arts. It taught the value of balance and the power of yielding, principles that resonated in a society where harmony was often more aspiration than reality. So, was Laozi an actual sage who penned his wisdom while riding his trusty buffalo into obscurity, or was he a mythical figurehead for a movement that refused to be boxed in? Either way, his legacy is undeniable. Taoism's emphasis on balance and natural order offers a timeless antidote to life's chaos, a reminder that sometimes the best way to win the game is not to play it at all. As we continue our journey through the labyrinth of ancient Chinese philosophy, remember this: whether Laozi was a real person or a legendary construct, his teachings have survived the test of time, offering a philosophical lifeline to those seeking refuge from the noise of the world. In a society obsessed with achievement, Laozi reminds us that sometimes the most profound wisdom lies in simply letting things be. And speaking of letting things be, let's dive into a philosophy that was all about not letting things be. Welcome to the world of legalism. If Confucianism was the etiquette lesson your grandma insisted on, and Taoism was the laid-back uncle suggesting you chill out, legalism was the drill sergeant barking orders at you to get your act together. This wasn't about inner peace or social harmony. It was about laws, order, and a level of control that would make even the most overbearing HOA blush. Enter Han Feizi, the poster child for legalism. Born around 280 BC in the state of Han, Han Feizi was less concerned with moral virtues and more about finding the most efficient way to run a state. Think of him as the ancient Chinese version of a ruthless CEO. His writings, compiled in the aptly named Han Feizi, were a masterclass in political strategy and governance. Forget warm and fuzzy inspirational quotes. Han Feizi's works were more akin to a handbook on how to keep your subjects in line and your enemies at bay. He embraced the idea that people are inherently selfish and need strict laws to keep them in check, a philosophy that didn't exactly lend itself to popularity contests. Now, the Han Feizi wasn't just a collection of edgy tweets about the human condition. It was a detailed blueprint for achieving political stability in a world that was about as peaceful as a cage fight. Han Feizi championed the use of Fa law, Shu methods, and Shu power as the three cornerstones of governance. He believed that clear laws, stringent enforcement, and a ruler's unyielding authority were the keys to maintaining order. In other words, the carrot might be nice, but the stick was absolutely essential. But why was this hard-nosed approach so appealing? Well, cast your mind back to the Warring States period, a time when Chinese states were playing an ancient game of risk with real consequences. With kingdoms falling like dominoes, rulers were more interested in survival than in philosophical musings about virtue or the Tao. Legalism offered a pragmatic, albeit harsh, solution to the chaos, a way to consolidate power and ensure stability in an era that made Game of Thrones look like a tea party. And then came the Qin dynasty, where legalism went from theory to terrifying reality. The Qin, led by the ever-ambitious Qin Shi Huang, took legalism and ran with it, implementing it with a zeal that was nothing short of draconian. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China, was the kind of guy who saw a legal code and thought, this needs more bite. Under his rule, the principles of legalism were applied with ruthless efficiency. The Qin dynasty's legalism was like the ultimate bureaucratic nightmare, complete with an extensive network of officials ensuring that everything from grain production to personal conduct adhered to state decrees. Harsh penalties were meted out for the smallest infractions, creating an atmosphere of fear that kept everyone on their toes and their best behavior. If you think your local DMV is bad, imagine a system where a misplaced comma could land you in hot water. But wait, there's more, because no discussion of Qin Shi Huang's reign is complete without mentioning his grand architectural endeavour, the Great Wall. Yes, the Great Wall was more than just an ancient selfie backdrop. It was part military defence, part emperor's pet project, built to fend off pesky nomadic invasions. The wall stretched over 13,000 miles, a testament to the Qin's commitment to security and to their fondness for monumental undertakings. Construction was as grueling as it was ambitious, with hundreds of thousands of labourers toiling under harsh conditions to bring the emperor's vision to life. Yet, while the wall was supposed to be a symbol of strength and protection, it also stood as a stark reminder of the human cost of legalism. Labourers, many of whom were conscripted peasants and prisoners, worked under brutal conditions, with countless lives lost during its construction. It's said that the wall was built with not just bricks and mortar, but the bones of those who perished, a grim legacy of the emperor's relentless pursuit of control. Despite its brutal methods, legalism left an indelible mark on Chinese governance. The Qin dynasty's strict legal code, centralized bureaucracy, and focus on state power set the stage for future dynasties, even as later rulers softened its harsher edges with Confucian ideals. Legalism's emphasis on law and order resonated long after the Qin's fall, influencing the development of Chinese legal traditions and governance. Now, let's not get too misty-eyed about the Great Wall's grandeur or legalism's efficiency. Behind the imposing fortifications and the veneer of order lay a society where individuality was crushed under the weight of the state, and dissent was met with swift punishment. The Qin's legalism may have unified China, but it did so at the cost of personal freedoms and human lives, a sobering reminder of the perilous balance between security and liberty. So, as we continue exploring the rich tapestry of ancient Chinese philosophy, let's keep in mind the stark contrasts and complex realities these schools of thought present. While Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism offered different paths to governance and personal conduct, they all emerged from the same crucible of chaos and necessity. Each philosophy, in its own way, sought to address the challenges of a tumultuous world, leaving legacies that continue to shape societies to this day. And with that, we leave the unforgiving world of legalism, poised to explore the next chapter in this fascinating saga of ancient Chinese thought. Remember, history is as much about the stories we tell as the truths we uncover, and in the case of legalism, those truths are as sobering as they are enlightening. Stay tuned as we unravel more threads in this intricate tapestry, because if there's one thing we've learned, it's that history never fails to surprise. Transitioning from the stark world of legalism, let's catapult into the present and see how these ancient philosophies are still pulling the strings in the puppet show we call modern life. Despite their dusty scroll origins, Confucius, Laozi, and Han Feizi have managed to worm their way into the fabric of today's culture, like philosophical ninjas silently influencing everything from boardroom strategies to bedtime reading. First, let's take a peek at Confucius, who would probably be horrified, or maybe delighted, to learn that his teachings are now a staple of self-help books and corporate seminars. The Confucian concept of Ren, or humanity, is the star player in the world of business ethics, where phrases like moral leadership and corporate social responsibility are more than just buzzwords, they're the new currency. Companies are eager to cultivate a junzi, or gentleman-like culture, where integrity and respect are the cornerstones of their brand identity. It's the kind of strategy that turns employees into loyalists and customers into fans, all while keeping the PR disasters at bay. Confucius's emphasis on hierarchy and order has also found an unlikely ally in modern corporate structures, where everyone from the intern to the CEO has a precise spot on the totem pole. But let's spice things up with a bit of Taoist tranquility. Laozi's go with the flow. Philosophy is a hit in the wellness industry, where Wu Wei is the mantra of choice for yoga instructors and mindfulness coaches. In a world where burnout is as common as bad reality TV, the Taoist ideal of living in harmony with the universe is pure gold. Laozi's teachings on simplicity and spontaneity have inspired millions to Marie Kondo their lives, shedding the unnecessary baggage and focusing on what truly sparks joy. It's about finding balance in a world that seems intent on spinning off its axis. Even in the tech world, where algorithms rule and efficiency is king, the Taoist principle of non-action, letting things unfold naturally, has been a counterintuitive yet effective approach, sometimes leading to breakthroughs that 1,000 late nights couldn't achieve. And then there's Unfazi, whose spirit would likely take a victory lap around the boardroom if he saw how his legalist ideas have percolated into the modern state apparatus. While his philosophies may not be getting any love in the self-help section, they certainly echo in today's policy-making and law enforcement strategies. The emphasis on strict legal frameworks and the use of power to maintain order can be seen in the way governments around the globe handle everything from tax laws to immigration policies. It's not all roses and sunshine, but you can't deny the efficiency of a system that runs like a well-oiled machine, even if it sometimes feels like the machine is running you. But hold on a second, before we start crowning these ancient philosophies as the ultimate life hacks, let's sprinkle in some reality. The Confucian focus on hierarchy can sometimes stifle innovation, trapping companies in a web of red tape and outdated practices. Taoism's go with the flow ethos might be great for Zen gardens, but isn't exactly a recipe for decisive leadership in the face of adversity. And legalism's rigid structure? Well, it might keep things running smoothly, but it often comes at the cost of individual freedom and creativity. Yet, despite these shortcomings, the philosophical trio of Confucius, Laozi, and Unfazi continue to wield influence, proving that even in an age dominated by AI and SpaceX, there's still room for ancient wisdom. It's a testament to the enduring power of ideas and the timeless nature of the human struggle to find meaning in chaos. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want a bit of sage advice when the world feels like it's one tweet away from implosion? In the end, what do these philosophies teach us about life, the universe, and everything? For starters, Confucius might remind us that respect and morality are the glue holding society together, even when it feels like everything else is falling apart. Laozi offers a gentle nudge to embrace life's unpredictability, to find peace in the ebb and flow rather than fighting against the current. And Unfazi? Well, he serves as a gritty reminder that sometimes a firm hand is needed to keep the ship steady, even if it means rocking the boat a little. So, next time you find yourself grappling with life's big questions or simply trying to navigate the tangled web of modern existence, remember that the answers might just be hidden in those ancient scrolls. Whether you're channeling your inner Confucius, embracing the Tao, or begrudgingly acknowledging Unfazi's pragmatic wisdom, there's a wealth of knowledge waiting to be tapped. And if nothing else, at least you've got some killer conversation starters for your next dinner party. History, after all, never fails to surprise us with its quirky lessons and timeless truths. In a world where takeout didn't exist and the nearest DoorDash was about 2,500 years away, the people of ancient Persia were busy crafting a culinary paradise from the bounty of their land. Stretching out like a well-set banquet table, the Fertile Crescent was more than just a catchy geographical term. It was the Persian Empire's very own all-you-can-eat buffet. With its rich soil and diverse climates, this region was the ancient equivalent of a Whole Foods, minus the organic labels and the judgmental glances from cashiers when you forgot your reusable bags. Let's talk geography, because, believe it or not, land matters when you're trying to feed an empire. Ancient Persia, at its height around the 5th century BCE, sprawled across what are now modern-day Iran, parts of Iraq and beyond, encompassing some of the most fertile lands on the planet. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers were like nature's own irrigation system, turning the region into a hotbed for agriculture. It was here that the Persians grew an impressive array of grains, fruits, and nuts that would make even the most ambitious farmer's market look like a roadside fruit stand. Wheat, barley, and millet were the backbone of the Persian diet, each grain holding secrets of ancient farming techniques that would make today's agricultural scientists nod in approval. But the Persians weren't just about grains. Oh no, they were the original locavores, long before the word was coined by some earnest food blogger. The empire's varied climate zones meant that almost every type of fruit and nut imaginable could be coaxed from the earth. Pomegranates, figs, dates, and grapes were as common as the air they breathed. And don't even get me started on the pistachios and almonds. These nuts weren't just for snacking, they were culinary stars in their own right, adding flavour and crunch to dishes that still make mouths water today. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like a bit of a fairy tale, with Persians frolicking through fields of plenty, hold that thought. Sure, the romantic image of golden grains swaying in a gentle breeze is tempting, but reality was more about hard work and ingenuity. The Persians were nothing if not practical, and their approach to farming was as systematic as it was savvy. They developed qanats, ingenious underground irrigation channels that transported water from mountains to their fields, ensuring crops thrived even in the blistering summer heat. These were engineering feats that would have had ancient engineers high-fiving each other, if high-fives had been a thing back then. But why does all this matter? Well, the culinary practices of ancient Persia weren't just about filling bellies. They were about power, trade, and cultural exchange. Food wasn't merely sustenance, it was currency, a means of forging alliances and demonstrating wealth. When Persian kings sat down to dine, they weren't just eating, they were sending a message. The lavish spreads of food were as much about political power as they were about gourmet indulgence. Imagine a diplomatic meeting today where leaders size up each other's plates rather than their military arsenals. It's a culinary chess game, and the Persians were grandmasters. Now, let's debunk a myth while we're at it. The idea that Persians spent their days feasting in hedonistic bliss is a bit of a stretch. Yes, there were banquets, and yes, they were lavish, but the reality was more grounded. Most people in the empire were farmers, and life for them was less about indulgent spreads and more about ensuring the next harvest. It was the classic work hard, eat well philosophy, centuries before it became a motivational poster in your local gym. In this culinary tale, the landscape itself was a protagonist, shaping not just the food, but the very culture of the Persian Empire. It was the ultimate farm-to-table movement, minus the hipster vibe and artisan labels. The ancient Persians may not have had Instagram to showcase their meals, but they understood that the true essence of cuisine lies in the land. And in their case, the land of the Fertile Crescent was a banquet of epic proportions. And speaking of the Fertile Crescent's culinary wonders, let's dive into the Persian pantry, shall we? This was no mere collection of random ingredients. It was a treasure trove that could make a master chef out of anyone with a pulse and a little imagination. Ancient Persians were the original foodies, minus the Yelp reviews and Instagram filters. Their pantry staples were as eclectic as they were extensive, and their cooking techniques could be considered avant-garde, even by today's standards. We're talking about a civilization that treated cooking like an art form, blending practicality with a touch of the exotic that would make even the most adventurous modern palate quiver with excitement. First up, let's talk grains. Beyond the wheat and barley that were the everyday staples, the Persians also cultivated millet, which they used not just for food, but as a symbol of agricultural innovation. This was a grain that could grow in less fertile soils, demonstrating that the Persians knew how to make the most out of even the toughest agricultural challenges. But the real magic happened when these grains hit the Persian kitchens. Bread, for instance, wasn't just sustenance, it was the culinary canvas on which Persian chefs painted their masterpieces. With a little yeast and a lot of love, they turned simple dough into flatbreads, leavened loaves, and everything in between. And let's not forget the rice. While not originally native to the region, the Persians adopted it with gusto, transforming it into the aromatic, saffron-infused pilafs that were the envy of neighboring empires. Now, let's spice things up, literally. The Persian approach to seasoning was nothing short of revolutionary. They weren't just sprinkling a bit of salt and pepper and calling it a day. No, they were the spice trailblazers, experimenting with flavors that would make a modern-day chef do a double take. Saffron, the gold of spices, was a Persian favorite, used to add a luxurious touch to both sweet and savory dishes. And then there were the herbs, mint, thyme, and basil, which were not just garnishes but key players in their culinary symphony. But the Persians didn't stop there. They ventured into the exotic, using ingredients like cardamom, cinnamon, and even rosewater to create flavor profiles that were both complex and unforgettable. It was a culinary alchemy of sorts, turning ordinary meals into edible experiences that lingered long after the last bite. Of course, all this culinary creativity required some serious preservation techniques because nothing rains on a gourmet parade like spoiled food. The Persians, with their knack for pragmatism, excelled in this area too. They mastered the art of pickling, using vinegar and salt to keep vegetables fresh long after the harvest. And when it came to meat, they employed a method called kashka, which involved drying and then rehydrating it as a kind of proto-jerky. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of packing your freezer with enough food to survive the apocalypse. Fermentation was another trick up their sleeve, and they used it to create everything from yogurt to wine, proving that good things really do come to those who wait. Now, let's tackle a myth that's been simmering for centuries, the notion that Persian cuisine was all about decadence and overindulgence. While it's true that banquets were lavish affairs, dripping with enough gold and silver to make Midas blush, the everyday dining experience was far more grounded. Most Persians lived on a modest diet, relying on legumes, grains, and the occasional meat dish. It was a balanced approach to eating, one that prioritized sustainability over sheer opulence. So while the kings feasted on peacock and quail, the average farmer was more likely to enjoy a hearty stew or a simple piece of bread with cheese. It's the culinary equivalent of the saying, champagne tastes on a beer budget. But let's not forget the Persian knack for combining the familiar with the foreign. The empire was a melting pot of cultures, and its cuisine reflected that diversity. Trade routes brought in exotic ingredients from India, Africa, and the Mediterranean, turning the Persian kitchen into a global spice rack. Imagine the culinary diplomacy happening here. Eggplants from India, dates from Mesopotamia, and honey from Anatolia all mingling in the same pot. It was fusion cuisine before the term even existed, and it laid the groundwork for the culinary exchanges that continue to shape our world today. In this context, the Persian kitchen was more than just a place to prepare food, it was a meeting ground for ideas and cultures. The dishes that emerged were not just meals, but symbols of a thriving empire that valued innovation and exchange. And in the grand scheme of things, this is what made Persian cuisine truly revolutionary. It wasn't just about feeding the empire, it was about uniting it, one dish at a time. So, the next time you tuck into a bowl of fragrant rice or savor the sweetness of a date, remember that you're tasting a bit of history, a connection to a time when the kitchen was the heart of an empire, and every meal was a testament to the ingenuity and creativity of the Persian people. And as we continue to explore this rich culinary heritage, keep in mind that we've only just scratched the surface. There's still much more to uncover about the Persian approach to food, from the innovative techniques to the exotic ingredients that turn dining into an adventure. Stay tuned, because the story of ancient Persian cuisine is far from over. Continuing our deep dive into the sumptuous world of Persian dining, let's shift the spotlight from the ingredients themselves to the grand theatre of dining. Imagine walking into a Persian banquet, not just any dinner, but a full-on spectacle where the menu was as much about social stratification as it was about culinary delight. Here, the table wasn't just set with food, it was decked out with political intrigue, alliances, and the occasional bout of social one-upmanship. You see, in ancient Persia, a meal was more than a chance to fill your belly. It was a social chessboard where every dish was a piece in a larger game of influence and power. The elite used these lavish banquets as arenas to show off their wealth and curry favor with the right crowd. We're talking spreads that would make today's Michelin-starred restaurants look like fast food joints. Picture tables groaning under the weight of roasted meats, dishes seasoned with spices worth their weight in gold, and wines flowing as freely as water from those ingenious canats we talked about earlier. But let's get real for a second. While the idea of endless feasting sounds appealing, it was also a tool of social control. The hierarchy was as clear as crystal. Those at the top dined on quail and peacock, while the lower strata made do with simpler fare. The banquets were exclusive, and the guest list was a who's who of political power players. Imagine being a noble trying to secure a seat at one of these tables. It wasn't just about the food. It was about who you knew and who you could make deals with over the course of a dinner. The Persians had perfected the art of turning a meal into a microcosm of their empire, a place where status could be cemented or shattered with a single seating arrangement. Speaking of seating, let's not forget the social dynamics at play. Where you sat was a direct reflection of your social standing. If you found yourself at the head of the table, congrats, you were in the emperor's good graces, at least for the evening. But if you were stuck at the far end, well, better luck next time. It's like the awkward family Thanksgiving dinner, where everyone jockeys for a seat near the turkey, except with a lot more at stake than just who gets the drumstick. Now, let's debunk a particularly persistent myth, the notion that these grand feasts were purely about indulgence. While it's true that the elite revelled in their culinary displays, there was often a strategic purpose behind the abundance. These gatherings were often a chance to forge alliances, negotiate marriages, or even plot the occasional coup. The food was the backdrop to a much more intricate dance of power and politics. In a way, each dish served was a metaphorical handshake, a nod of agreement, or, sometimes, a calculated insult. Yes, you could insult someone with a meal. By serving them something simple while lavishing others with delicacies, you were sending a very clear message about their place in the social order. But let's zoom out from the glitz and glamour of the aristocratic tables and take a peek into the everyday dining habits of the common folk. For the average Persian, a meal was less about social maneuvering and more about survival. The diet was simple: grains, legumes, and the occasional bit of meat or fish if the season allowed. Bread was the staple, and it was often accompanied by a side of yogurt or cheese. These meals were a far cry from the royal feasts, but no less significant. They represented the backbone of Persian society, the sustenance that powered the hands that tilled the fields and built the empire. It's important to remember that while the elites dined in luxury, the majority of the population lived modestly, and their meals reflected the agricultural cycles and economic realities of the time. The common folk may not have had access to the same spices or extravagance, but they developed their own culinary traditions, passing down recipes and techniques that celebrated the flavors of the land. This was food as sustenance, a reminder of the hard work that went into cultivating each ingredient. And let's not overlook the role of trade in shaping Persian dining practices. The Persian Empire was at the crossroads of several major trade routes, which meant that exotic ingredients and culinary ideas flowed into their kitchens from all corners of the known world. This constant exchange of goods and ideas enriched Persian cuisine, turning it into a melting pot of tastes and techniques. The influence of trade was so profound that it even trickled down to the common people, who would have experienced the effects of these exchanges in subtle ways, such as a new spice finding its way into a stew or a different type of bread gracing the table. Yet, despite this cosmopolitan flair, regional variations remained strong. What you ate often depended on where you lived. Coastal areas had more fish, while inland regions relied heavily on what could be grown or raised locally. This regional diversity contributed to a rich tapestry of culinary practices that varied from one part of the empire to another. It's a testament to the adaptability and resilience of the Persian people, who'd learned to make the most of their environment regardless of their social standing. The interplay between food, culture, and power in ancient Persia offers a fascinating glimpse into how an empire fed its people and its ambitions. Whether through grand banquets or humble meals, Persian dining was a reflection of a society that understood the importance of food as both sustenance and symbol. It was a world where a meal could be a declaration of power, a gesture of goodwill, or simply a moment of nourishment. As we continue to explore the culinary heritage of ancient Persia, remember that we've only scratched the surface of this complex and flavorful history. There are still many more stories to unwrap, from the role of women in the kitchen to the influence of religion on dining practices. So stay tuned as we delve deeper into the world of Persian cuisine, where every dish tells a story and every meal is a journey through history. Now, let's take a detour down the ancient Silk Road, a dusty superhighway of sorts, where traders swapped not just goods but entire cultures. Picture caravans loaded with silk, spices, and other exotic treasures making their way across thousands of miles of rugged terrain. It's globalization before we had a word for it, with Persian cuisine as one of its VIP passengers. The Silk Road was like Amazon Prime for the ancient world, except the delivery time was measured in months, not days. Persian cuisine didn't just stay in Persia, oh no. It was on the move, hitching rides on those caravans and spreading its influence like wildfire, or maybe more like rosewater on a warm breeze. This was a time when the phrase fusion cuisine could have been coined if only the Persians had a knack for catchy marketing. As these trade routes expanded, so did the Persian palate, incorporating ingredients and techniques from as far away as China and India. One of the biggest stars of this culinary exchange was saffron. Known as the ancient world's liquid gold, this spice was worth its weight in, well, gold, literally. In certain parts of the ancient world, saffron was so valued that it was used as currency. A single pound of this spice could set you back the equivalent of $5,000 today. And why not? It took roughly 75,000 saffron blossoms to produce a single pound. Talk about labor-intensive. If you're imagining fields of bright purple flowers and hunched-over farmers, you're spot on. It was a painstaking process, but one that paid off in the end. Saffron made its way into everything from rice dishes to perfumes, proving that a little luxury never hurt anyone's reputation or their cooking. But saffron wasn't the only thing making waves. Think of the Silk Road as a giant culinary swap meet where everything from spices to cooking techniques was up for grabs. Persian merchants, with their knack for trade and negotiation, were the original food influencers, spreading the gospel of their cuisine far and wide. They introduced eggplant to the Mediterranean, a gift from the Indian subcontinent. The Persians were also instrumental in popularizing citrus fruits, which they brought back from their ventures into the Far East. The influence was a two-way street, of course. Persian kitchens were no strangers to foreign flavors. Chinese tea, Indian spices, and even Roman garum, a fermented fish sauce, found their way into Persian cooking pots. This wasn't just a culinary flirtation, it was a full-blown love affair with global flavors. The Persians were like the ancient world's version of a Michelin-starred chef, constantly experimenting and pushing the boundaries of what was possible in the kitchen. Now, let's debunk a little myth about the Silk Road. It wasn't a single, well-trodden path with signposts and rest stops. Instead, it was a sprawling network of routes that crisscrossed Asia, stretching over 4,000 miles from China to the Mediterranean. It wasn't for the faint of heart either. Traders risked everything, from bandits to sandstorms, all in the pursuit of profit and exotic goods. But for those willing to brave the journey, the rewards were immense. Trade wasn't just about spices and silk, though. It was also about ideas. The Silk Road was a melting pot of cultures, a place where ideas mingled as freely as the goods being exchanged. Persian cooking techniques influenced the cuisine of far-flung empires, just as Persian art and architecture left their mark on lands from Europe to Asia. It was a vibrant, dynamic exchange that enriched everyone involved. Well, everyone who managed not to get robbed or lost along the way. But let's not forget the social impact of all this cross-cultural exchange. The influx of new ingredients and ideas didn't just change what was on the Persian dinner table, it transformed the very fabric of society. The Persian Empire became a hub of innovation, a place where the boundaries of possibility were constantly being pushed. It was a world in which a humble farmer could suddenly find himself cultivating exotic spices, or a merchant might return from a long journey with tales of distant lands and strange new foods. This culinary globalization had its price, of course. The prosperity brought by trade routes like the Silk Road wasn't evenly distributed. The rich got richer, while the lower classes often saw little benefit from the booming trade. It was a familiar story of economic disparity, one that echoes through the ages. But the allure of exotic goods was undeniable, and the Persian elite were more than willing to pay a premium for the finest ingredients money could buy. The cultural exchange didn't stop at the kitchen door either. Persian cuisine influenced and was influenced by the religious and philosophical beliefs of the time. Zoroastrianism, the dominant religion in ancient Persia, played a significant role in shaping dining practices. For instance, the reverence for fire in Zoroastrianism meant that grilling and roasting were favored cooking methods. Meanwhile, the concept of balance, a key element of Zoroastrian philosophy, was reflected in the Persian approach to seasoning and flavor combinations. In the end, the Silk Road was more than just a trade route. It was a conduit for the exchange of ideas and culture, a highway of history that connected disparate parts of the world in a shared culinary dialogue. And as Persian flavors traveled far and wide, they wove themselves into the fabric of countless cultures, leaving a legacy that continues to influence global cuisine today. So, as we continue to explore the rich tapestry of Persian culinary history, remember that each dish is more than just a meal. It's a chapter in a story of trade, innovation, and cultural exchange, a story that's far from over. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of the Persian culinary legacy, and there are still many more flavors to savor and stories to tell. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into this fascinating world, where every bite is a taste of history and every meal a journey through time. Now, as we wrap up our culinary time travel through ancient Persia, let's zoom in on how these ancient recipes have simmered and stewed their way into modern cuisine. Because, let's face it, the legacy of Persian culinary traditions is the kind of history that leaves a lasting flavor on the palate of time. The foods of ancient Persia weren't just a flash in the pan of history, they're the slow-cooked stew that has been marinating for centuries, influencing dishes all over the world. Take the kebab, for instance. If you've ever found yourself savoring a skewer of juicy, flame-kissed meat, congratulations. You're participating in a tradition that dates back over 1,000 years. Persian kebabs were the original fast food, served hot off the grill and eaten with fingers, not forks. The Persians knew that grilling over an open flame was more than just a cooking method, it was a communal event, a way to bring people together. Today, whether you're chowing down on a shish kebab at a backyard barbecue or ordering a doner kebab from a street vendor, you're tasting a piece of history that's older than most world religions. Now, let's talk rice. Persian rice dishes, or pilafs, were the ancient world's answer to haute cuisine. These weren't just bowls of plain old grains, they were vibrant, aromatic masterpieces infused with saffron, nuts, and dried fruits. Take a bite of any saffron-infused rice dish today, and you're experiencing a culinary tradition that stretches back to the days when Cyrus the Great was a household name. In fact, the word pilaf itself is derived from the Persian word pilav, a testament to the dish's storied origins. And don't even get me started on the herbs. If you've ever seasoned a dish with mint, thyme, or basil, you're channeling your inner ancient Persian chef. These herbs were the backbone of Persian flavor, adding complexity and depth to everything from soups to stews. Not to mention, they were the precursors to modern herbal medicine, used to treat everything from digestive issues to insomnia. So the next time you sprinkle mint over your salad, remember, you're not just adding flavor, you're engaging in a practice that was once believed to have healing powers. But how did these culinary traditions spread so far and wide? It wasn't just the allure of delicious food, though that certainly helped. The real magic was in the movement of people, traders, travelers, and conquerors, all carrying Persian flavors with them like culinary ambassadors. The Persian Empire, with its vast network of roads and trade routes, was like a giant culinary exchange program, ensuring that Persian dishes didn't just stay in Persia. They were shared, adapted, and adopted by cultures across the globe. Now, let's debunk a myth that often gets garnished with a dash of romanticism, the notion that Persian cuisine was all about opulence. Sure, there were banquets fit for kings, but the real genius of Persian cooking lay in its adaptability and resourcefulness. The average Persian wasn't dining on peacock, they were making magic with grains, legumes, and the occasional cut of meat. Persian cuisine was about making the most of what you had, a philosophy that resonates with today's movement towards sustainable eating. And let's not forget the role of religion in shaping Persian culinary practices. Zoroastrianism, with its emphasis on purity and balance, influenced everything from what was cooked to how it was cooked. The use of fire in cooking wasn't just practical, it was sacred, a nod to the Zoroastrian reverence for flame. This religious influence ensured that Persian cuisine was not only about taste but also about maintaining a spiritual connection to the food. As we look at modern Persian cuisine, we see a rich tapestry woven from ancient threads. The influence of Persian cooking can be felt in Middle Eastern dishes, Mediterranean flavors, and even in the spice-laden cuisines of India and Southeast Asia. It's a testament to the enduring power of Persian culinary traditions that they continue to shape the way we eat today. In the end, the legacy of Persian cuisine is a reminder that food is more than just sustenance. It's a cultural artifact, a historical document on a plate. Every time you enjoy a kebab, a pilaf, or a dish infused with herbs and spices, you're participating in a culinary conversation that spans millennia. It's a dialogue between past and present, a testament to the ingenuity and creativity of the Persian people. So, as you tuck into your next meal, take a moment to savor the history behind each bite. Remember that you're part of a culinary legacy that has transcended time and geography, a legacy that continues to influence the way we eat and think about food. And as we wrap up our journey through ancient Persia, let's raise a metaphorical glass to the chefs of the past, who, with their skill and imagination, left us a delicious inheritance that still resonates today. Here's to the flavors of history, a banquet of epic proportions that continues to nourish our bodies and our souls. The sun pokes through the wooden shutters of your modest room in Tyre, a city teeming with the chatter of traders and the clatter of ships. Your eyelids flutter open, and the first thought that zips through your mind isn't the majestic Mediterranean stretching out before you, but rather, what's the price of purple dye today? Welcome to the life of a Phoenician sailor, where your first love is the sea, and your second is the sound of coins clinking in your leather pouch. As you roll out of bed, the smell of the salty sea air mingles with the earthy aroma of baked bread from the market. Tyre is no sleepy village. It's the pulsating heart of Phoenician trade, a city that's as dynamic as the waves lapping against its shores. You know Tyre isn't famous for its scenic views or its charming architecture, but for its economic prowess. The city's wealth is built on the backs of sailors like you, navigating dangerous waters to transport goods far and wide. The bustling port is your office, and today, like every other day, promises to be a full docket of commerce, bargaining, and a touch of swashbuckling adventure. You head down to the docks, where your ship, a sturdy vessel carved from the finest Lebanese cedar, awaits. Forget the romantic notion of a grand galleon. Your ship is more like a nimble cat, darting across the Mediterranean with agility and purpose. The deck is cluttered with amphorae filled with wine, their rounded bellies promising intoxication and profit in equal measure. These clay vessels are the lifeblood of your trade routes, numbering in the hundreds, each one representing a transaction, a negotiation, a story. Before you set sail, there's the small matter of navigation. It's easy to romanticize the image of a sailor gazing up at the stars, but let's be real. It's more like squinting at a bunch of twinkling pinpricks and hoping for the best. The Phoenicians, however, have turned this guessing game into an art form. You've got your trusty tools, the gnomon, a primitive sundial for daylight hours, and the stars themselves for when the sun clocks out. The North Star is your steadfast guide through the uncertainty of the night. When you've got to make landfall at a distant port, these celestial bodies are your GPS, your compass, your lifeline. As you ready the ship for departure, you think about the purple dye once more. Ah, Tyrian purple. The colour of kings, the hue of wealth, the shade of power. It's extracted from the murex snail, a process that requires about 10,000 snails to dye just a single toga. This isn't just about fashion, it's about status. The dye is worth more than its weight in gold, and as your ship carries this precious cargo, you know you're not just a sailor, you're a purveyor of prestige. Before the wind fills your sails, there's the small matter of logistics. The Mediterranean isn't a placid lake. It's a bustling highway of trade routes crisscrossing perilous waters. Your path today might take you to Cyprus or further to the Aegean, each destination connected by a network as intricate as the threads of a tapestry. You're part of a grand dance of commerce, where goods like glass, another Phoenician specialty, find their way into the hands of distant civilizations. The glass you transport isn't just for decoration. It's a symbol of innovation, a testament to your people's ingenuity. On the docks, merchants haggle over prices, their voices rising above the din of the city. You hear snippets of conversation. 30 shekels for the wine, no less than 50 for the glass. Each transaction a reminder of the bustling economy you're part of. It's a tough world, where profits can evaporate as quickly as sea mist, and every voyage is a gamble against fate. But as a Phoenician sailor, you've learned to thrive in this uncertainty, to navigate the complexities of trade with the same deftness as you navigate the seas. As the ship finally pulls away from the harbour, the rhythmic creak of the oars becomes your background music. The coastline of Tyre recedes, and ahead lies the vast expanse of the Mediterranean, a stage where history is made with every voyage. You're not just a cog in the machine, you're a driving force in the engine of ancient commerce, pushing the boundaries of exploration and trade. The day stretches before you, full of promise and potential profit. You know that by evening you'll be anchored in another port, the amphorae unloaded, and the deals struck. But for now, the open sea beckons, a shimmering expanse of opportunity and adventure. As you stand at the helm, the wind in your hair and salt on your skin, you may not have the luxury of knowing how your story will be told in millennia to come, but you're certain that the footprints you leave on the sands of time are etched in the waves you conquer. With the wind at your back and the sun dancing on the Mediterranean waves, the ship becomes your world, a floating microcosm of Phoenician life. Here, every swell of the sea is a reminder that glamour often floats on a sea of grime. Let's talk about that daily grind, shall we? Life aboard a Phoenician ship isn't just about swashbuckling and sunsets. It's about elbow grease, sweat, and the ever-present scent of brine and ambition. First off, let's tackle the crew hierarchy, because even on a cramped ship, someone's got to be the big fish in the small pond. At the top, you've got the ship's captain, the Rab al-Onia, whose word is law, like a CEO with a particularly reliable tan. Think of him as less master and commander and more middle manager and navigator. He's the guy who decides if you're heading to Cyprus or Carthage, and crucially, how close you skirt those pesky pirate-infested waters. Below him are the officers, each with their own specialties. The helmsman, or cugnath, is your go-to for steering this wooden beast through calm and storm alike, wielding the tiller like it's some ancient joystick. Then, there are the oarsmen, your basic ancient gym rats. These guys give new meaning to rowing machine, except their sweat equity doesn't earn them a six-pack, just a steady wage and a sore back. The rest of the crew? They're your jack-of-all-trades, handling everything from rigging the sails to bailing out water when the Mediterranean decides to get up close and personal. Everyone has a role, and everyone knows that stepping out of line could mean a dip in the drink, and not the refreshing kind. Speaking of which, let's dive into the myth of the romantic seafaring life. This isn't some pleasure cruise. The quarters are tighter than a Pharisee's purse strings, with sailors sleeping in shifts, often in the same spot where they work, eat, and yes, sometimes puke. Privacy is more myth than reality. Think of it as the original open-plan office, where the only cubicle is the horizon. The food situation? Let's just say you're not exactly dining on ambrosia. Rations consist of barley, olive oil, lentils, and maybe some dried fish, if Neptune is feeling generous. It's not the Mediterranean diet you've heard about, it's more like a Mediterranean fast. Wine makes an appearance, but not for pleasure. This stuff is diluted, and served as a necessity to keep scurvy at bay, or at least to make the hardtack go down easier. Got a sweet tooth? Tough luck. Sugar's not even on the radar yet. And then there's the ever-looming threat of piracy. Forget the Pirates of the Caribbean charm. These guys are more pirates of the Mediterranean, and they don't sing catchy sea shanties. For Phoenicians, piracy was a constant threat, like the ancient world's version of ransomware. To counteract this, ships often travelled in convoys, safety in numbers being the unspoken rule of the sea. But even a convoy isn't foolproof against a surprise raid, which is why every sailor worth his salt keeps a keen weather eye on the horizon. Shipwrecks, too, lurk in the back of every sailor's mind, a sort of occupational hazard that no amount of insurance can cover. Navigation might be an art form, but even the best can find themselves at the mercy of a sudden storm or hidden reef. The Mediterranean is dotted with the bones of ships that didn't quite make it, a poignant reminder that the sea gives and the sea takes away. But let's not forget what made the Phoenicians the kings of the sea, their shipbuilding prowess. These folks were the Elon Musks of ancient maritime engineering. Phoenician ships, like the sturdy Gorloi, were crafted from Lebanese cedar, a wood so revered it was practically a brand name. These vessels were sleek and nimble, designed to cut through waves with the grace of a dolphin, yet sturdy enough to withstand the tantrums of Poseidon. One might think this was all smooth sailing, but every innovation came with its own set of challenges. The famous Cothan harbour of Carthage, for instance, was an engineering marvel, a circular port that allowed for the rapid dispatch of ships. It's the ancient world's answer to a Formula One pit stop. Yet, maintaining this naval supremacy required constant innovation and the relentless drive to outpace competitors both on the water and in the marketplace. And let's not forget the economic machine that fuels these voyages. Each amphora of wine, each bolt of silk, each lump of precious metal isn't just cargo, it's a cog in the vast and intricate machinery of trade that stretches from the Levant to the Iberian Peninsula. The Phoenicians are not just sailors, they're the original global traders, knitting together a tapestry of commerce long before globalization was a thing. So, as you stand on the deck, the salty breeze in your hair and the ship slicing through the waves, remember this. The romance of the sea is often a mirage, cloaking the grit and grind beneath. But that's the secret, isn't it? The real story isn't in the stars or the sails, it's in the sweat of the sailor, the creak of the oars, and the relentless pursuit of the horizon. The sea is a fickle mistress, but for those who dare to chart its course, it offers a stage upon which to etch their legacy. As the day wears on, you know that each wave conquered is a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of those who dare to call themselves Phoenician sailors. As you ride the waves, pondering the horizon's promise, let's pivot from the salt and sweat of ship life to the intricate dance of politics in the ancient Mediterranean. It's midday, and while your crew sweats under the sun, the real heat is in the political maneuvering between empires. The Phoenicians are the underdogs of ancient diplomacy, masterfully playing their hand in a high-stakes game of imperial chess. Let's face it, being sandwiched between juggernauts like Egypt, Assyria, and Greece is like living between a rock and a hard place. Only the rock is Pharaoh, and the hard place is a Greek phalanx. The Phoenicians weren't just trading purple dye and glass, they were peddling something far more valuable, peace. Imagine this. You've got Assyria breathing down your neck with its colossal army, and Egypt with its pharaohs who fancy themselves gods on earth. Yet, somehow, the Phoenicians managed to keep their ships afloat and their cities standing. How, you ask? Diplomatic finesse sharper than a Minoan dagger. Take, for instance, their dealings with Assyria. While most ancient cities would crumble under the Assyrian war machine, the Phoenicians offered tributes, silver, gold, and luxury goods, turning potential conquerors into eager customers. In return, Assyria allowed them a degree of autonomy, a rare commodity in those iron-fisted times. It's a classic case of, if you can't beat them, trade with them. This wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving amid chaos. By positioning themselves as indispensable middlemen, the Phoenicians made themselves too valuable to obliterate. It's like they invented the art of being Switzerland before Switzerland was even a thing. Their cities, like Tyre and Sidon, became bustling hubs where ideas, goods, and yes, even gossip, flowed as freely as wine at a Greek symposium. Speaking of Greeks, let's not overlook the cultural exchanges with these olive oil aficionados. The Greeks were intrigued by Phoenician crafts and innovations, absorbing them like a sponge. The Phoenicians, in turn, borrowed elements of Greek culture, particularly in art and architecture. Think of it as the ancient world's version of a cultural mashup. Centuries before fusion, cuisine was cool. Then there's Egypt, the land of pyramids and papyrus. The Phoenicians' relationship with Egypt was akin to a diplomatic tango, sometimes stepping on toes, but always in sync. They supplied cedar wood for Pharaoh's grandiose projects and, in return, secured favourable trading terms. The Phoenicians were the original supply chain ninjas, ensuring their goods reached the markets of Memphis and beyond. But, oh, the colonies! Carthage, the jewel of the West, wasn't just some outpost, it was a strategic masterstroke. Founded in the late 9th century BCE, Carthage was the Phoenicians' answer to the expanding trade networks of the Mediterranean. Situated in modern-day Tunisia, it was perfectly positioned to control maritime traffic between the eastern and western Mediterranean. Carthage was more than a colony, it was a beacon of Phoenician influence. By establishing such outposts, the Phoenicians didn't just expand their trade network, they secured their legacy. Carthage grew into a formidable power in its own right, eventually challenging Rome itself, though that's a tale for another day. The city's circular harbour, the Kothon, was an engineering marvel, allowing rapid deployment of ships, a testament to the Phoenicians' naval genius. Now, let's spill some ink on the myth of the Phoenicians as mere merchants. Sure, they were traders extraordinaire, but their political acumen was equally impressive. They crafted alliances not just with goods, but with words and gestures, navigating the treacherous waters of ancient diplomacy with the same skill they showed in their seafaring. They were the brokers of peace in a world that seemed to prefer the clang of swords. Yet, the romantic allure of the Phoenicians as peaceful traders belies the gritty reality of their world. They were shrewd operators, fully aware that one misstep could mean annihilation. It was a constant game of balancing acts, paying tributes, forging alliances, and occasionally wielding a dagger when diplomacy failed. They were masters of the long game, planting the seeds of empire in foreign soils, knowing that these would bear fruit long after their own cities had faded into history. In the end, the Phoenicians' true legacy isn't just in the goods they traded or the cities they founded, but in their ability to adapt and thrive in an ever-changing world. They were the silent architects of cultural and commercial bridges, long before globalization was a buzzword. As the midday sun casts its golden glow on the Mediterranean, remember, every sail unfurled, every treaty signed, was part of the Phoenician strategy to carve a niche in a world dominated by giants. Theirs was an empire of influence, not of territory, a testament to the power of trade, diplomacy, and a dash of audacity. As the sun dips toward the horizon, casting a golden glow over the undulating waves, your ship edges closer to the bustling port of Carthage. The Mediterranean breeze carries a scent of salt and anticipation as the city's silhouette sharpens against the evening sky. This isn't just another stop on your trade route, it's a thriving hub of commerce and culture, where the clang of hammers and the hum of markets blend into a symphony of economic prosperity. As your vessel nudges up to the wharf, you're greeted by a cacophony of sounds, vendors hawking their wares, the lowing of oxen, and the chatter of merchants negotiating deals with the fervour of Wall Street brokers on a caffeine high. The Phoenicians, masters of maritime trade, understand that this is where the magic happens. It's not just about unloading amphorae or haggling over textiles. It's about weaving the threads of connectivity across the Mediterranean tapestry. Speaking of textiles, let's dive into the economics of this ancient fashion industry. Your ship carries bolts of luxurious cloth, dyed in colours as vibrant as a sunset over the Tyrrhenian Sea. The prized Tyrian purple dye, extracted from murex snails, is the Chanel No. 5 of its day, symbolising both opulence and exclusivity. Sure, you've heard the myths of Phoenician secrecy, where every dye recipe was cloaked in mystery, but here's the kicker. It wasn't so much about secrecy as it was about logistics. When it takes 10,000 snails to dye a single toga, you don't have to worry about competitors outpacing you. They've got their own snail army to wrangle. Now, onto the cold hard cash, or rather, the lack thereof. Coins are still a novelty in many parts of the Mediterranean, so welcome to the world of bartering, where a Phoenician's worth is measured in goods, not gold. The bartering system is like a game of chess, each move calculated to maximize value. You might trade a bolt of your exquisite snail-infused fabric for a dozen amphorae of olive oil, or perhaps a cask of wine for a handful of silver ingots. Silver, by the way, is the closest thing to a universal currency here, the Bitcoin of the ancient world, valued for its portability and allure. As you navigate the market stalls, the variety of goods is staggering. Cedar timber, shipped from the lush forests of Lebanon, is as coveted as a celebrity endorsement, strong, aromatic, and perfect for shipbuilding or palatial construction. Then there are the glassware and pottery, each piece a testament to Phoenician craftsmanship, glistening under the midday sun. These aren't just trinkets, they're cultural emissaries, spreading Phoenician influence one amphora at a time. The market isn't just a place of exchange, but a crucible of cultural diffusion. Here, Greek merchants barter alongside Egyptians, and the air is thick with a mishmash of dialects. It's like the United Nations, minus the formalities, and with more shouting. Every transaction is an opportunity for cultural exchange, where you might learn a new Greek word in exchange for a lesson in Phoenician script. Imagine picking up a Corinthian vase and finding traces of Egyptian motifs, a tangible reminder of how cultures blend and borrow from one another. Amidst this economic dance, it's easy to romanticize the Phoenicians as the suave brokers of international trade. But let's not kid ourselves. This is a cutthroat world. Deals can sour faster than milk left in the Carthaginian sun, and not every merchant plays fair. You've got to keep your wits about you, your hand close to your purse, and your eyes on the prize. The market is a battleground, where fortunes are won and lost with the flick of a quill. And while we're debunking myths, let's tackle the idea of a Phoenician monopoly on trade. Sure, they were dominant players, but monopoly is a strong word. The Phoenicians were more like the Amazon of their time, ubiquitous, efficient, and slightly terrifying in their reach. But they weren't the only game in town. Emerging powers like the Greeks were always nipping at their heels, eager to snatch a piece of the lucrative pie. Yet the Phoenicians had a knack for staying one step ahead, thanks to their unrivaled maritime know-how and an uncanny ability to forge alliances. They understood that trade routes were as much about relationships as they were about goods. By nurturing connections with distant lands, they ensured that Phoenician ships were welcomed across the Mediterranean, their sails a familiar sight from Cyprus to Hispania. As you make your way back to the ship, pockets heavy with silver, the sun sets over Carthage, casting long shadows over the bustling port. You reflect on the day's transactions, each deal a thread in the rich tapestry of Phoenician commerce. It's not just about the goods exchanged, but the stories told, the friendships forged, and the cultures intertwined. The Phoenicians might not have left behind grand monuments or sprawling empires, but their legacy is etched in the currents of the Mediterranean, in the way they connected worlds and shaped civilizations. As the stars begin to twinkle above, you know that tomorrow will bring new ports, new opportunities, and new stories to tell. And as a Phoenician sailor, you wouldn't have it any other way. As you drift back to your ship, the evening air cools the sweat of the day's commerce, and a sense of Phoenician legacy settles over you like a snug cloak. It's time to step back and take stock, not just of your profits, but of the far-reaching impact your people have had on the world. The Phoenicians aren't just the merchants of the Mediterranean, they're the unsung architects of cultural connectivity, leaving behind ripples that shape history long after their sails have disappeared over the horizon. Let's start with a little gem, the Phoenician alphabet. Forget what you learned about Egyptian hieroglyphs and Sumerian cuneiform. Beautiful, but about as practical as a chocolate teapot in the desert. The Phoenicians stripped down writing to its essentials, creating a 22-character alphabetic script that would make even the most verbose Twitter user envious. This wasn't just about efficiency, it was revolutionary. By reducing writing to a series of symbols that represented sounds, they democratized literacy. Suddenly, you didn't need a PhD in hieroglyphs to pen a love letter or a shopping list. The Greeks, always the intellectual magpies, snapped up the Phoenician alphabet faster than you can say cultural appropriation. They adapted it, added a few vowels, and voila, the ancestor of the modern alphabets we use today. So, next time you jot down a note or send a text, give a nod to those Phoenician scribes. They turned writing from an elite pastime into a tool for the masses, a shift as seismic as the invention of the printing press millennia later. But let's not just talk letters, let's talk ships. The Phoenicians were the Elon Musks of the ancient maritime world. Their shipbuilding innovations were the stuff of legend. The Gaulois, their round ships, were the ocean liners of their time, capable of carrying massive cargoes across treacherous seas while keeping the crew dry and mostly unscathed. Then there were the biremes, with their 2 banks of oars, zipping across the water like ancient speedboats. These weren't just vessels, they were the engines of economic and cultural exchange, the original carriers of globalization. And while we're on the topic of legends, let's address the mythos of the Phoenician sailor. The romanticized image of the fearless navigator is appealing, but let's ground it in reality. Sure, they were skilled mariners, but it wasn't all adventure and discovery. Life at sea was brutal tight quarters, iffy food, and the ever-present threat of pirates and storms. Yet these sailors pushed through, driven by the promise of profit and the lure of the unknown. They were the daredevils of their day, part merchant, part explorer, and all grit. Their influence wasn't confined to the economic sphere. It seeped into the cultural and political fabric of the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians didn't build empires of land, but empires of influence. Their trade routes became conduits for exchanging not just goods but ideas, art, and even religious practices. The goddess Astarte, for example, journeyed across the seas, morphing into Aphrodite for the Greeks and Ishtar for the Babylonians. It's a testament to how the Phoenicians weren't just traders of material goods, but brokers of cultural capital. Now, let's talk about the legacy of this ancient people. The Phoenicians faded into history, absorbed by the empires they once outmaneuvered. Yet, their influence remains, a testament to their ingenuity and adaptability. They didn't leave behind pyramids or colosseums, but their legacy is etched in the DNA of our modern world. In every alphabetic character, in every ship that sails the seas, their spirit lingers. The myth of the Phoenician sailor endures, capturing our imagination even today. There's a romantic allure to the idea of these ancient mariners navigating by the stars, their ships cutting through the misty dawn. It's a potent image, but let's not forget the grit behind the glamour. The Phoenicians were tenacious, adaptable, and above all, masters of their fate, in a world that was unpredictable and often unforgiving. As you stand on the deck, watching the stars twinkle above the darkening sea, remember that every Phoenician voyage was a step into the unknown. They didn't have the luxury of GPS or weather forecasts. They relied on their knowledge, their skills, and a healthy dose of courage. In a way, they were the original adventurers, charting courses into uncharted waters and, in doing so, leaving an indelible mark on history. So, as you lay down to rest, rocked by the gentle sway of the ship, reflect on the legacy of the Phoenicians. They remind us that history isn't just written by those who conquer with swords, but by those who connect, innovate, and dare to dream beyond the horizon. The Phoenicians didn't just trade in goods, they traded in ideas, in culture, and in the very essence of civilization. And in doing so, they taught us that the true measure of an empire isn't its size, but its influence. If you think ancient religious practices were all about peace, love, and kumbaya moments, well, buckle up, because we're diving into a world of altars, animal sacrifices, and Bronze Age drama with the ancient Hebrews. Yeah, you heard me right. Forget your Sunday school picnics. This is a story with way more grit. So, let's set the stage. It's the Bronze Age, roughly 3300 to 1200 BCE, and the ancient Hebrews are just getting their monotheistic groove on. This was a time when the world was more interested in hammering out bronze tools than in philosophical debates about the divine. Yet here were the Hebrews, amidst a swirling mix of polytheistic neighbors, carving out a belief system that would eventually shape billions of lives. Spoiler alert, they weren't just sitting under fig trees waiting for divine inspiration. Now, the Hebrews didn't develop their religious practices in a vacuum. They were smack dab in the Fertile Crescent, a veritable crossroads of cultures and ideas. You know, the kind of place where, if you didn't like your neighbor's cooking, you could just wait a few centuries for a new civilization to move in next door. Influences came from the Canaanites to the west and the Egyptians to the south, and each left a mark on what would become the Hebrew religious identity. Let's talk Canaanites for a second. These guys were the cool kids on the block, with their swanky city-states and a pantheon of gods that would make a polytheist blush. There was El, the chief god, and Baal, the storm god, with a penchant for thunderous displays of power. Basically, the Thor of the ancient Near East, minus the hammer. The Canaanites' religious practices, with their altars and temples, were the backdrop against which the Hebrew monotheism developed. It's like living next to a nightclub when you're trying to start a library. The contrast makes your choices pop. The Egyptians, on the other hand, were the world's first influencers, with their pyramids and hieroglyphics. They didn't just build massive stone tributes to their gods, they were all about rituals and the afterlife. Their religious practices were as elaborate as their eyeliner, which, let's be honest, was really on point. The Hebrews, according to some scholars, might have picked up a few ideas from these neighbors. Not the eyeliner, unfortunately, but perhaps the concept of a single, all-powerful deity watching over everything. But religion isn't just about big ideas. It's also about the nitty-gritty of daily worship. Archaeological digs have unearthed altars and temples that offer a glimpse into the practical side of Hebrew worship. These were no minimalistic affairs. Sacrifices were a big deal, particularly the kind where animals were the unfortunate guest of honor. Picture this. You're a goat in ancient Israel, happily munching on some grass. and bam, you're part of a divine transaction. It sounds harsh, but in a world where pleasing the deity could mean the difference between rain and drought, you'd be looking at that goat with a much more practical eye. Now, these sacrifices were meticulously organized. We're talking about whole burnt offerings, fellowship offerings, and sin offerings, each with its own purpose and method. It was like a divine menu where every dish had a specific spiritual significance. And yes, it was messy, bloody, and probably didn't smell great, but it was the way the ancient Hebrews connected with their God. In a time when crops could fail and enemies could invade at any moment, having a direct line to the divine was worth a little bloodshed. And let's not ignore the archaeological evidence that gives us these insights. Sites like Megiddo and Lachish have yielded up altars and temples that hint at the scale and importance of these practices. They even found a few inscriptions, which are the ancient equivalent of graffiti, offering glimpses into the mindset of the people. Yahweh is God, and sheep are nervous, might have been scrawled on the temple walls if they had had a sense of humor. The reality is, while the Hebrew Bible gives us a grand narrative of divine encounters and covenantal promises, the archaeological record shows us the boots-on-the-ground reality of these religious practices. It's one thing to read about Abraham's covenant, it's another to see the charred remains of a burnt offering, the tangible evidence of ancient faith. So, as we roll through the Bronze Age, the Hebrews are laying down the foundations of a monotheistic faith in a world that was decidedly not monotheistic. They were the spiritual rebels, if you will, setting the stage for a religion that, centuries later, would impact a third of the world's population. It's a tale of cultural exchanges, divine experiments, and, yes, a few too many sacrificed goats. But that's the ancient world for you. Messy, mysterious, and endlessly fascinating. And we're just getting started. Ready for a plot twist in our ancient Hebrew saga? While the Hebrews were busy carving out their unique brand of monotheism, they were also knee-deep in the gritty realities of life in the ancient Near East. Forget the romantic notion of a people serenely evolving their theology under the stars. This was more like a theological roller coaster, with plenty of bumps along the way. Now, let's talk about the big elephant in the room, polytheism. You see, the Hebrews didn't just wake up one morning, stretch, and decide to worship a single deity named Yahweh. Nope, the path from polytheism to monotheism was a winding road, full of detours and divine drama. Picture yourself in the ancient Levant. You've got El and Baal from the Canaanites, Ra and Osiris from the Egyptians, and a pantheon of other gods vying for your devotion. The temptation to hedge your bets with a few extra deities was very real. After all, why stick to one divine insurance policy when you could have a whole portfolio? But here's where the Hebrews started to zig, where everyone else zagged. Enter Moses, the man, the myth, the legend. Moses is like the Steve Jobs of ancient religion, innovative, a bit controversial, and definitely a game changer. Born around the 13th century BCE, he's traditionally credited with liberating the Hebrews from Egyptian bondage and leading them to the Promised Land. Although historians debate the specifics, the narrative of Moses is central to the Hebrew transition towards monotheism. Cue the dramatic moment on Mount Sinai. Moses descends with the 10 Commandments, those stone tablets that were less of a casual memo and more of a divine contract. The commandments were a seismic shift in religious law, a blueprint for a society centered around a single, all-powerful God. And let's face it, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," is pretty clear on where the Hebrews were meant to place their allegiances. But why the sudden pivot to monotheism, you ask? Was it all spiritual enlightenment, or were there more pragmatic forces at play? Spoiler, it's often the latter. Economic and social factors played a crucial role in this religious evolution. For starters, a unified belief system under one God provided social cohesion and political stability. In a world where tribal infighting was as common as sandals, having a single deity to rally around was a savvy move. And then there's the economic angle. Monotheism streamlined the sacrificial system, less divine mouths to feed, so to speak. In a society where resources were scarce and survival was a daily grind, centralizing worship could have been a practical necessity. Instead of spreading offerings across a pantheon like an ancient buffet, the Hebrews could focus their religious energies and sacrifices on one altar. This efficiency might have been the ancient equivalent of hitting the easy button. But don't think this transition was smooth sailing. The shift to monotheism didn't happen overnight, nor did it occur without resistance. Archaeological evidence suggests that polytheistic practices lingered among the Hebrew people for quite some time. There are ancient inscriptions and figurines that hint at the worship of Asherah, a goddess who was allegedly Yahweh's consort. It seems the Hebrews were reluctant to fully commit to a divine bachelor lifestyle. Politically, monotheism offered its own advantages. It provided a solid foundation for national identity, something that could unify the tribes of Israel under a single banner. In a region rife with conflict and conquest, having a cohesive identity was crucial for survival. It was like the ancient version of branding, only instead of catchy logos, they had a singular god. So, what about Moses' role in all this? Well, Moses was more than just a religious figure, he was a political leader and lawgiver. The 10 Commandments weren't just spiritual edicts, they were societal laws that governed behavior and established order. In a way, Moses was laying down the constitutional framework for a new nation. His influence was profound, even if some aspects of his story are shrouded in legend more than fact. While the biblical narrative paints Moses as receiving divine wisdom directly from God, historians suggest that these laws were likely influenced by existing legal codes from surrounding cultures. The Code of Hammurabi, for instance, predates Moses by several centuries and contains similar legal principles. It's a reminder that even divine inspiration can take cues from the neighbors. But let's not forget the human element in all this. The Hebrews weren't just passive recipients of divine decrees, they were active participants in shaping their faith. The move towards monotheism required a collective shift in mindset, a willingness to embrace a new way of understanding the divine. It's a testament to the dynamic interplay between culture, economics, and spirituality in shaping religious belief. So, as we leave this chapter open, remember that the evolution of Hebrew monotheism was a complex tapestry woven from myriad threads. It was a journey marked by economic necessity, social innovation, and, yes, a touch of divine inspiration. As we continue to unravel this tale, keep in mind that history is seldom a straightforward narrative. It's a mosaic of human endeavors, and the ancient Hebrews were nothing if not resourceful in navigating the divine maze of their world. Stay tuned for more twists and turns as we delve deeper into this fascinating story. As we unfold this ancient narrative, the spotlight now shifts to the festivities that peppered the Hebrew calendar, turning ordinary days into vibrant displays of faith, community, and, let's be honest, a little bit of organized chaos. Picture the Hebrew calendar as an ancient mashup of religious fervor and social glue, each festival serving as both a divine reminder and a community bonding session. Take Passover, for instance. If you're imagining a serene religious affair, think again. This was less about quiet reflection and more about family feasts, ritual foods, and a story with enough drama to rival any soap opera. The Passover celebration commemorates the Hebrews' escape from Egyptian bondage, a tale that's as riveting as it is legendary. Here's the basic plot. A series of plagues, a parting sea, and a hasty exit that would have left even the fastest sprinter in awe. But the real kicker was the ritual meal known as the Seder, which had the kind of symbolic depth that would make a literary critic salivate. The Seder was an elaborate affair, with each element, bitter herbs, unleavened bread, and a sacrificial lamb serving as a culinary poet's ode to suffering and liberation. Bitter herbs, for instance, symbolized the bitterness of slavery, while unleavened bread, matzo, was a nod to the hasty departure from Egypt, a time when waiting for dough to rise just wasn't in the cards. And the lamb? Well, let's just say it was a reminder of the original Passover sacrifice, where lamb's blood marked the Hebrew homes, sparing them from the final plague. It was a vivid, visceral ritual that brought history to the dinner table, literally. Now, here's the myth-busting moment. While the Exodus story is central to Jewish identity, archaeological evidence doesn't exactly back up the grand narrative of millions of Hebrews making a dramatic exit. In fact, some scholars suggest the numbers were more modest and the timeline more complicated. But let's face it, a few thousand people left Egypt over a century doesn't have the same cinematic flair. The truth, as always, is somewhere between the romanticized legend and the archaeological record. Fast forward to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which was more about spiritual detox than any festive feasting. Imagine an ancient reset button for the soul. Yom Kippur was the one day a year when the Hebrew high priest would enter the Holy of Holies, the innermost and most sacred area of the ancient temple, to make atonement for himself and the people. The stakes were high, and the ritual was meticulously detailed. Incense, a ram, and 2 goats were involved. 1 goat was sacrificed, and the other, the scapegoat, was sent into the wilderness, symbolically carrying away the sins of the people. It's basically the ancient prototype of out with the old, in with the new, but with more livestock involved. Yet despite its solemnity, Yom Kippur reinforced a sense of community and social order. The collective act of atonement served as a societal equalizer, reminding everyone, from the poorest shepherd to the richest merchant, that no one was above divine judgment. It was the ancient version of a well-timed group therapy session, with the added benefit of divine forgiveness. But what about the notion that Yom Kippur was all about guilt and misery? Not quite. While it's true that fasting and repentance were central themes, the ultimate goal was spiritual renewal, an optimistic reset for the year ahead. It was less about wallowing in past mistakes and more about setting course corrections, a concept that resonates even today. Beyond the religious significance, these festivals had practical implications too. They were pivotal in maintaining social cohesion and continuity, something that was particularly vital in a tribal society where unity was not just a spiritual ideal but a political necessity. Passover and Yom Kippur were communal affairs that brought people together, reinforcing social bonds and cultural identity. They were the original team-building exercises, long before corporate retreats were a thing. Economically, these festivals had their own ripple effects. Consider the cost of a sacrificial lamb during Passover. It wasn't just about religious observance, it was an economic exchange that stimulated local trade. The preparation for these festivals required resources, food, wine, and sacrificial animals, which meant bustling marketplaces and thriving local economies. Picture it as the ancient version of holiday shopping, but with more livestock and fewer credit cards. And let's not forget the social stratification that these festivals subtly highlighted. While everyone participated, the wealthier families could afford more elaborate celebrations, creating a visible hierarchy within the community. It was a reminder that, despite the religious emphasis on equality before God, earthly disparities were a reality. Now, let's tackle another myth, the idea that these festivals were always celebrated in perfect harmony. Not quite. Records suggest that disputes over the correct way to observe certain rituals were not uncommon. Different sects and tribes often had their own interpretations, leading to a fair share of theological debates. Imagine the ancient equivalent of a Twitter feud, but with scrolls and verbal sparring instead of hashtags and memes. In the grand scheme, these rituals and festivals were more than just religious observances. They were the backbone of Hebrew cultural identity, shaping and reflecting the values of the community. They were the ancient world's way of saying, we're in this together, even when the details got a bit messy. As we leave this chapter open, remember that these ancient ceremonies were as much about the here and now as they were about the divine. They were communal experiences that brought people together, celebrated shared history, and reinforced social fabric. Festivals like Passover and Yom Kippur were the glue that held the society together, a reminder that even in the ancient world, community and faith walked hand in hand, each strengthening the other. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the layers of this ancient tapestry, challenging assumptions and exploring the complex interplay between faith, society, and the practical realities of life in the ancient Hebrew world. As we continue this exploration, let's shine a light on the prophets, those enigmatic figures who were the ancient world's version of spiritual influences. Forget social media. These guys wielded the power of divine revelation and could make or break a king's day faster than a nasty tweet. In the Hebrew tradition, prophets were the conduit between the divine and the mundane, a role that carried both clout and controversy. Now, if you think the life of a prophet was all about Zen moments and celestial whispers, think again. Being a prophet was more like navigating a political minefield while juggling divine messages. Take Elijah, for instance. This guy was a firebrand, literally. Legend has it, he called down fire from heaven to prove a point against the prophets of Baal. Talk about an explosive argument. Elijah was active during the 9th century BCE, the time when the northern kingdom of Israel was knee-deep in idolatry and political turmoil. His confrontations with King Ahab and Queen Jezebel are biblical drama at its finest, with enough twists to make Shakespeare envious. But why were prophets like Elijah so crucial? Well, they were the moral compass in a world where the lines between right and wrong often blurred under the weight of political ambition and economic pressure. Prophets had the unenviable job of reminding the Hebrews of their covenant with Yahweh, especially when the allure of neighboring deities was as tempting as a forbidden Instagram filter. They were the divine fact-checkers, calling out corruption and injustice, often at great personal risk. Think of them as the original whistleblowers, but with divine backing and a penchant for dramatic flair. Yet the prophets were more than just fire and brimstone preachers. They were also poets and visionaries, crafting messages that resonated deeply with the people. Their words were not just spoken, but eventually written down, becoming part of the sacred texts that would define Hebrew identity. This transition from oral to written tradition marked a seismic shift in how religious practices were preserved and propagated. Before this shift, stories and laws were relayed through an oral tradition as ancient as time itself. Think of it as the original game of telephone, but with a lot more at stake. Enter the scribes, those unsung heroes who took on the Herculean task of compiling these oral traditions into written form. The result? Texts like the Torah, a collection of laws, narratives, and teachings that became the bedrock of Hebrew religious life. Imagine the Torah as the ancient world's ultimate bestseller, except instead of a catchy cover, it had divine endorsement. The process of compilation wasn't just about preserving words, it was about solidifying a collective identity. In a world where tribes were as diverse as desert flora, having a unified text was akin to having a national anthem. But let's not romanticize the process. Writing down these texts wasn't a serene scholarly pursuit. It was a dizzying dance of political and economic pressures. The scribes didn't just have to get the divine details right, they had to ensure that texts served the broader goal of unifying a fractured people. This wasn't just about capturing the past, it was about shaping the future. The texts had to resonate with the present realities of tribal conflict, economic challenges, and the ever-looming threat of foreign powers. Consider the economic angle for a moment. The act of compiling these texts required resources: papyrus, ink, skilled labor, all of which came at a cost. In a society where survival often hinged on the whims of nature, diverting resources for religious texts was a calculated gamble. But it was a gamble worth taking. The written word provided a stability and continuity that oral tradition couldn't match. It was a cultural investment, one that promised to pay dividends in unity and identity. Politically, these texts served as a rallying point. They offered a shared narrative that transcended tribal boundaries, creating a sense of belonging to something greater than the sum of its parts. In a region where the geopolitical landscape was as volatile as an ancient soap opera, having a cohesive identity was crucial. The Torah and other sacred writings became the glue that held the disparate tribes together, offering a moral and legal framework that everyone could rally around. But here's the kicker. While the written word was a powerful tool for unity, it was also a source of contention. Different sects and schools of thought emerged, each with its own interpretation of the sacred texts. Picture it as the ancient equivalent of theological debates on Twitter, but with more papyrus and fewer hashtags. These disagreements, while divisive, also fueled a vibrant intellectual tradition that kept the faith dynamic and evolving. Let's not forget the role of international politics in this literary endeavor. The Hebrews were not isolated. They were part of a larger world where empires rose and fell with alarming regularity. The Assyrians, Babylonians, and later the Persians were more than just distant neighbors. They were formidable forces that impacted every aspect of Hebrew life. The pressure to maintain a distinct identity in the face of such powerful influences was immense. Writing down their beliefs was a way of asserting cultural autonomy, a declaration that, while empires might come and go, the Hebrew faith was here to stay. In the end, the transition from oral tradition to written text was a turning point, one that set the stage for the Hebrew religion to endure the test of time. It was a bold move in a world where change was the only constant, a testament to the resilience and adaptability of a people determined to preserve their way of life. As we continue to peel back the layers of this ancient saga, remember that the story of the Hebrews is one of transformation, a journey marked by struggle, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of a divine vision. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into this fascinating narrative where the past is never quite what it seems and the future is always a page away. As we continue peeling back the layers of the ancient Hebrew saga, it's impossible to ignore the profound impact these religious practices have had on the world stage, particularly on the heavyweights of modern faith, Christianity and Islam. These two religions, covering nearly half the global population today, owe a significant part of their theological DNA to the innovations and traditions established by the ancient Hebrews. Think of it as a spiritual inheritance, but instead of grandma's brooch, it's a set of ideas that have shaped civilizations. First, let's talk Christianity, the faith that took a Hebrew foundation and built a global cathedral. Jesus of Nazareth, a Jewish figure himself, didn't just stumble on the scene, he emerged from this rich tapestry of Hebrew tradition. His teachings, rooted in the Hebrew scriptures, echoed the moral and ethical precepts of the Torah. The famous Sermon on the Mount? It reads like an ancient TED Talk with a Hebrew backdrop, emphasizing values like compassion, justice, and humility, concepts that were already old news by his time. But here's the twist. Christianity took these Hebrew ideas and, much like a startup with a game-changing app, scaled them worldwide. Christianity's adoption and reinterpretation of Hebrew laws. Think the Ten Commandments provided a moral compass that guided Western civilization through millennia. The notion of a day of rest, for instance, went from being a Sabbath rule to a staple of modern work-life balance. Even today, as we enjoy our weekends, we're unknowingly high-fiving Moses for his ancient time management skills. But let's not get too misty-eyed. The transition from Hebrew tradition to Christian doctrine wasn't without its bumps. Early Christians, many of whom were Jewish, grappled with the question how much of the old law should apply to this new faith. This wasn't just a theological debate, it was a cultural tug-of-war that shaped the nascent church. The Council of Jerusalem around 50 CE, which decided that non-Jewish converts didn't need to follow all Hebrew laws, was a pivotal moment. It was like the religious version of a corporate pivot, allowing Christianity to appeal to a broader audience. Now, what about Islam? Well, Islam also tips its hat to Hebrew traditions, and it's not just a polite nod in the hallway, it's a full embrace. The Quran, Islam's holy book, acknowledges many Hebrew prophets like Moses and Abraham, integrating them into its narrative. In fact, Moses is mentioned more in the Quran than any other prophet, a testament to his enduring influence. The ethical and monotheistic principles that were revolutionary in Hebrew times found a second life in the teachings of Islam. Islamic law, or Sharia, reflects this Hebrew legacy in many ways, with an emphasis on justice and community welfare. The dietary laws, for example, have striking similarities, from the prohibition of pork to the method of animal slaughter. This isn't just a culinary coincidence, it's a shared heritage that underscores a deep historical connection. But while these religions carried forward many Hebrew traditions, they also adapted them to their unique contexts. Islam's introduction of a lunar calendar, for instance, diverged from the Hebrew solar-lunar hybrid, reflecting the practical needs of a nomadic society. It's a reminder that religious practices are as much about practicality as they are about piety. Beyond religious texts, the legacy of Hebrew laws and ethics is etched into the bedrock of contemporary society. Take the concept of justice, one that ancient Hebrews championed with fervor. The idea that everyone is equal before the law, regardless of status, has its roots in the Hebrew legal system. It's an egalitarian ethos that has echoed through the corridors of history, influencing everything from the Magna Carta to the Declaration of Independence. So, the next time you're in court, remember you're standing on the shoulders of ancient judges who knew how to lay down the law. Economically, the Hebrew practice of forgiving debts every 7 years, known as the sabbatical year, was a revolutionary concept that aimed to prevent generational poverty. While we're not quite living in a world where debts vanish magically, the idea has inspired modern bankruptcy laws and discussions about debt relief. It's a testament to how ancient solutions can inform modern economic policy. Let's not forget the Hebrew influence on ethical business practices. The prohibition against false weights and measures in the marketplace laid down in Leviticus was an early attempt at consumer protection. Today, this principle lives on in the regulations that keep businesses honest and fair, from Wall Street to Main Street. But here's the kicker. While these practices have left a tangible mark on our world, the mythologized versions of Hebrew history continue to enchant us. The romanticized tales of the Exodus, the grandeur of Solomon's temple, or the wisdom of King David capture our imagination, even if the archaeological evidence suggests a more nuanced reality. It's like discovering that your favorite movie is based on a true story. The embellishments don't detract from the truth, they enhance its allure. The enduring allure of these myths lies in their ability to convey universal truths about human nature, struggle, and redemption. They remind us that history isn't just a catalogue of dates and events. It's a narrative rich with lessons and legacies. The ancient Hebrews, with their blend of faith, innovation, and resilience, left us a story that continues to resonate. So, as we draw this saga to a close, let's acknowledge the profound legacy of the ancient Hebrews. Their religious practices weren't just rituals frozen in time, they were dynamic forces that shaped human civilization. From ethical principles that guide our laws to the spiritual frameworks of major world religions, the echoes of the Hebrew past are all around us. And while the mythologized versions of their history add a splash of drama, the reality is no less compelling. It's a legacy that proves, once again, that history is more than just dusty books and forgotten tombs. It's the foundation of our collective journey, a testament to the enduring power of faith and the human spirit. You wake up to the sound of Spartan discipline echoing through the crisp morning air. The sun is just peeking over the rugged Taygetus mountains, casting a stark yet kind of beautiful light across the Laconian plain. Sparta isn't exactly the lush paradise you might find in Athens or the bustling marketplace of Corinth. Nope, this is Sparta, where the landscape shares the same no-nonsense vibe as the people. The terrain is rocky and unforgiving, much like the stern faces of the Spartan warriors who march past your workshop every day. But you, my friend, are not here to wield a spear or shout, "This is Sparta," at some hapless invader. You're an artisan, part of the Pr0oi, the non-citizen residents who make life here possible. Now, before you start feeling like an extra in a sword and sandal epic, let's get one thing straight. Being a Pr0oi isn't exactly the glamorous life you might have read about in some Hollywood screenplay. While the Spartans are off training for their next military campaign, you're the backbone of the economy, making sure that everything from pottery to tools is in tip-top shape. Your day starts early because in Sparta, idleness is about as welcome as a Persian soldier. As the day begins, you step out into the bustling agora. Well, bustling might be a slight exaggeration. Sparta isn't known for its marketplaces teeming with philosophers and olive oil traders. Here, trade is practical and straightforward, much like the residents. The agora is modest, functional, just like the austere lifestyle that the Spartan society idealizes. You see other Pr0oi setting up stalls, displaying their wares with a certain pragmatism that would make any Athenian merchant shake their head in bewilderment. You might be wondering how exactly you fit into this militaristic machine. Well, it's like this. Spartans are full-time soldiers. Someone else has to handle the day-to-day necessities. Enter the Pr0oi. You're the craftsmen, the merchants, the folks who keep the gears of Spartan society turning. You're kind of like the unsung heroes of this ancient city-state. Without your pottery, the Spartans wouldn't have anything to store their precious black broth in. And let's be honest, what's more Spartan than a good bowl of black broth? Speaking of broth, the Spartan economy isn't built on luxury goods or opulent displays of wealth. It's about utility and necessity. The currency isn't gold or silver, but rather iron bars, because nothing says we're not about extravagance, like lugging around a hunk of metal to buy a loaf of bread. And these iron bars? They're heavy, unwieldy, and a constant reminder that Sparta values strength and endurance over convenience and comfort. As you work on shaping clay or hammering metal, you can't help but appreciate the unique position you hold. You're a skilled artisan, creating the very goods that sustain this society. It's a bit of a paradox, really. You're part of a culture that's all about military might, yet your role is inherently creative. It's a delicate balance, like walking a tightrope between the expectations of Spartan austerity and the demands of your craft. Now, let's clear up a common misconception. Life as a Pr0oi isn't all hardship and toil. Sure, you're not a full-fledged citizen with the right to vote or own land, but you do enjoy a certain degree of freedom that the helots, Sparta's serfs, don't. You're free to trade, to travel, to engage in the economic life of Sparta. You have a voice, albeit a limited one, in the community's affairs. And while you're not marching in formation with the soldiers, your contribution is valued in its own right. As the sun climbs higher, casting long shadows across the uneven streets, you take a moment to appreciate the stark beauty of this place. The rugged landscape, the disciplined society, the sense of purpose that infuses every aspect of life here. It's not the romanticized vision of ancient Greece that you might have imagined, but it's real, it's tangible, and it's yours. You're part of a community that, despite its rigid structures, allows you to create, to contribute, and to carve out a niche in a world defined by its soldiers. And let's not forget the social dynamics at play. You're rubbing shoulders with fellow artisans, each of you bringing something unique to the table. There's a camaraderie among the Pr0stitutes, a shared understanding of your place in this hierarchy. Sure, you might not be dining with the Spartan elite, but there's a certain pride in knowing that your work is essential, that without you, even the mightiest Spartan warrior would find their life considerably more difficult. As the day progresses, the sounds of Spartan life surround you, the clinking of iron, the rhythmic marching of soldiers, the chatter of fellow artisans. You're reminded that while the world might see Sparta as a monolith of military power, the reality is far more complex. It's a society where each role, each individual, contributes to the whole. And in this intricate tapestry, your thread is just as vital as any other. So, as you shape your clay or weave your textiles, take a moment to appreciate the unique position you hold. You're part of an ancient world that, while far removed from the comforts of modern life, offers its own sense of purpose and belonging. It's not all spears and shields after all. There's art, there's craft, there's life beyond the battlefield. You, my friend, are the artisan of Sparta. And today, like every day, you're making history, one carefully crafted piece at a time. Now, let's get our hands dirty. Literally. As a Spartan artisan, your workbench is a bustling epicenter of creativity and pragmatism. Whether you're molding pottery, hammering away at metal, or weaving intricate textiles, you're not just crafting items, you're creating the backbone of Spartan society, one understated yet essential piece at a time. Forget the Hollywood glamour. There's nothing cinematic about blackened fingernails and the constant smell of clay or soot. But hey, that's where the magic happens. Let's start with pottery, the unsung hero of ancient Greek craftsmanship. In Sparta, pottery isn't just about aesthetic appeal, it's about utility. You've got your amphorae for storing olive oil, craters for mixing wine, and let's not forget the humble kylix, the wide-bowled cup that's perfect for Spartan drinking sessions which, to be honest, probably involve less wine and more of that infamous black broth. Your clay comes from the rich deposits found in the Eurotas River Valley, a gift from nature that you transform into functional art. It's a delicate dance between form and function. Each piece must be sturdy enough to withstand daily use, yet crafted with an eye for balance and proportion. And don't let anyone tell you that Spartans didn't appreciate a little flair. Sure, they might not have been as flamboyant as those Athenians with their elaborate red figure vases, but there's a quiet beauty in the simplicity and symmetry of Spartan pottery. Your hands shape the clay with care, knowing that each groove and curve serves a purpose. It's a reminder that even in a society as austere as Sparta, there's room for creativity and expression. Now, let's switch gears to metalwork, an art that requires as much skill as it does brute strength. You work with bronze and iron, materials that are as tough as the warriors who wield them. Ironically, while the Spartans are famous for their iron currency, it's bronze that dominates the metalwork scene. You're crafting everything from weapons and armor to more mundane items like farming tools and eating utensils. The process is labor-intensive, involving casting, hammering, and polishing. As you work, you can't help but marvel at how these simple materials, when shaped by skilled hands, can become objects of both beauty and utility. And let's not forget textiles, the quiet but critical player in the Spartan economy. You might not be weaving the opulent silks of Persia, but your woolen garments are essential for the daily life of Spartans. The process is meticulous, involving the spinning of wool into thread on a spindle, then weaving it into fabric on a loom. Each piece must be functional, capable of withstanding the wear and tear of Spartan life. And while the color palette might lean heavily on the muted side, There's a certain elegance in the understated patterns and textures you create. Now, about those trade routes, because contrary to popular belief, Sparta wasn't a hermit kingdom cut off from the rest of Greece. Quite the opposite, in fact. Despite their reputation for self-sufficiency, the Spartans engaged in trade with other city-states, bringing in goods and ideas that enriched their society. Your wares might find their way to distant markets in Corinth, or even across the Aegean to Asia Minor. The Spartans imported goods like grain, timber, and metals, which were vital for sustaining their economy and military. Trade routes crisscrossed the ancient world, and while Sparta wasn't Athens with its vast trading network, it wasn't entirely isolated either. The roads and sea lanes that connected Sparta to other Greek city-states were the lifelines that brought much-needed resources into this militaristic society. Imagine your pottery, stamped with the mark of Spartan craftsmanship, being bartered in a bustling Corinthian agora. It's a testament to the interconnectedness of the ancient world, a reminder that even a city-state as insular as Sparta couldn't thrive in complete isolation. Speaking of myths, let's dispel a few. The image of Sparta as a closed-off fortress, shunning all outside influence, is as exaggerated as a fisherman's tale. While it's true that the Spartans valued simplicity and self-reliance, they weren't above borrowing ideas and practices that could enhance their way of life. The exchange of goods and ideas through trade brought new techniques and materials to your workbench, challenging you to innovate and adapt. Take ironworking, for example. The technology to forge weapons and tools from iron spread across the Greek world through trade and warfare, and the Spartans, ever the pragmatists, adopted these advancements eagerly. The result? Superior armaments that gave them an edge on the battlefield, and tools that made your job as an artisan a little easier, or at least more efficient. As you reflect on the day's work, you can't help but feel a sense of pride in your craft. Each pot, each tool, each garment is a piece of history, a testament to the skill and ingenuity of Spartan artisans. Despite the city-state's reputation for martial prowess, the reality is far more nuanced. You're part of a vibrant community of craftspeople, traders, and thinkers who contribute to the richness of Spartan life. It's not all spears and shields. There's creativity, there's trade, there's a subtle complexity that defines the Spartan experience. And as the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the rugged landscape, you pack up your tools, satisfied with a day's work. You've played your part in the grand tapestry of history, contributing to a society that, while often misunderstood, is as multifaceted as the wares you craft. Tomorrow, you'll return to your workshop, ready to shape more than just clay and metal. You'll be shaping the very essence of Spartan life. It's a role that's both humbling and exhilarating, a reminder that even in a world defined by its warriors, the artisan's touch is indispensable. As you close up shop for the day, the sound of clanging metal and distant chants fade into the evening air, but the undercurrents of Spartan society persist like an ever-present drumbeat. Here in the land of the crimson cloaks and fierce warriors, life is a tightly choreographed dance between duty and freedom, and you, the artisan, are an essential, albeit unlauded, part of the spectacle. Let's talk about the social pyramid, which is as rigid as the laconically eloquent Spartan laws. At the top, you've got the Spartiates, full-fledged citizens who dedicate their lives to military service. Then there's you, Pr0stitutes, essentially the middle children of Spartan society, neither serf nor soldier, but crucial nonetheless. You're the merchants, the craftsmen, the spine of the Spartan economy. And finally, the helots, the state-owned serfs who do the agricultural heavy lifting, are at the bottom, living a life that's about as glamorous as a wet toga. Now, you might be thinking, why all this hierarchy? Can't we all just get along? Well, in Sparta, this social structure is the bedrock of their militaristic society. While the Spartiates train to keep the borders safe, someone has to keep the economy ticking and the fields ploughed. Enter the Pr0stitutes and helots. But don't mistake your position as an artisan for an easy ride. Your interactions with the helots are limited, yet you witness their struggles and resilience. They're the silent cogs in the Spartan machine, often subjected to harsh treatments to keep them in check, because nothing says social stability. Quite like an annual ritual of terror known as the Cryptia, where Spartan youths are encouraged to keep the helot population in line. Think of it as an extreme version of community policing with a decidedly darker twist. But let's reel it back to you, the artisan, balancing on this social tightrope. Your role is unique, a curious blend of freedom and constraint. While you can't vote or own land like the Spartiates, you have the liberty to travel, trade, and perhaps most importantly, create. And within the confines of Spartan law, which dictates everything from the shape of a soldier's shield to the length of your hair, seriously, Spartan men were known for their flowing locks, you find a space for artistic expression. It's a bit like finding a glimmer of creativity in a world dominated by uniformity. The influence of Spartan laws on your daily activities is as pervasive as the city's legendary discipline. These laws, attributed to the semi-mythical lawgiver Lycurgus, are designed to maintain the Spartan way of life. They govern everything from economic transactions to personal conduct, and while they might seem oppressive, they're also what keeps the city-state running like a well-oiled phalanx. For instance, the iron currency you handle daily is a direct result of these laws, meant to discourage the accumulation of wealth and keep everyone focused on the collective good rather than personal gain. It's the ancient equivalent of carrying around a barbell to buy your groceries. A constant reminder that life here is about strength and endurance, not ease and luxury. But despite this rigid legal framework, you manage to carve out a niche for yourself. You're like an artist working with a limited palette, finding beauty in simplicity and function. Your pottery, while utilitarian, speaks to a quiet elegance. Your metalwork, though bound by the requirements of Spartan austerity, showcases a mastery of form and durability. Each piece is a testament to the delicate balance between Spartan restraint and artistic freedom. And let's not forget your crucial role in the Spartan war machine. While the Spartiates might be the ones wielding the spears, it's your craftsmanship that ensures those spears don't snap on the battlefield. Your tools and weapons are as integral to the Spartan military as the soldiers themselves. It's a symbiotic relationship. Your artistry provides the means for their martial prowess, and their protection allows you the freedom to pursue your craft. It's like a well-rehearsed dance, where each step, each movement is vital to the overall performance. This delicate balancing act extends beyond your workshop, influencing your personal life as well. The communal nature of Spartan society is both a blessing and a curse. While you enjoy certain liberties, you're also part of a community that's as tightly knit as a well-woven chitin. Your life is intertwined with those around you, bound by a shared purpose and common goals. It's a peculiar mix of individuality and collectivism, where personal achievements are celebrated, but always in the context of the greater good. As an artisan, you navigate these complexities with a deft hand, much like shaping clay or hammering bronze. Your interactions with fellow Pr0ikois are marked by camaraderie and mutual respect. You're all in this together, each contributing to the vibrant tapestry of Spartan life. And while you might not dine with the elite or command a phalanx, your role is no less important. You're the unsung hero of this ancient city-state, quietly crafting the essentials that allow Sparta to thrive. So, as you lay down your tools for the night, take a moment to appreciate the intricate web of relationships and responsibilities that define Spartan society. It's not all about the glory of battle or the rigidity of law. There's a subtle complexity that underpins every aspect of life here. You, the artisan, embody this complexity, balancing the demands of your craft with the constraints of a society defined by its soldiers. Tomorrow, you'll return to your workshop, ready to shape more than just metal and clay. You'll continue to mold the very essence of Spartan life, contributing to a community that, despite its rigid structures, allows for moments of creativity and expression. It's a role that's both humbling and empowering, a reminder that even in a world dominated by warriors, the artisan's touch is indispensable. As you lay down your tools for the night, it's impossible to ignore the subtle buzz of political intrigue that hangs in the air like the scent of olive oil in the agora. You see, even in a society as seemingly monolithic as Sparta, the political landscape is as rocky as the hills surrounding the city. It's a drama that unfolds quietly, yet its reverberations reach even the smallest artisan's workshop. Now, let's dive into the murky world of Spartan politics, shall we? At the helm, we've got two kings. Yes, two, because one head is good, but two are better when you're trying to outmaneuver your rivals. It's a bit like having two captains on one ship. They're meant to work in harmony, but let's be real, harmony is as rare as a Spartan in a toga party. These kings, from the Agiad and Eurypontid dynasties, are locked in a delicate dance of power, each trying to keep the other in check while steering the ship of state. The kings lead in battle and perform religious duties, but their power isn't absolute. They're more like figureheads with a touch of military flair. Enter the ephors, the real puppet masters of Spartan politics. These 5 officials, elected annually, are like the ancient version of a board of directors, but with more sandals and less corporate jargon. They hold the kings accountable, oversee day-to-day governance, and ensure that the laws of Lycurgus are followed to the letter. Think of them as the watchdogs of tradition, barking loudly at any sign of deviation. For you, the artisan, the machinations of these power players might seem distant, like thunder in the mountains. But make no mistake, their influence trickles down to your workshop in subtle yet profound ways. Political stability, or the lack thereof, affects trade routes, influences demand for your goods, and shapes the very fabric of your daily life. When the ephors decide to flex their muscles, the ripples are felt throughout Spartan society. They can impose new taxes, regulate trade, and even dictate the types of goods that are produced. So, if they decide that Spartan soldiers need more shields and fewer vases, well, guess who's shifting from clay to bronze? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The political scene in Sparta is about as transparent as a Spartan's leather cuirass. Behind the scenes, alliances are forged and broken faster than you can say hoplite. The ephors play a crucial role in maintaining the delicate balance of power, but they're also adept at playing one king against the other, ensuring that neither gains too much authority. It's a political chess game, and the ephors are the grandmasters, moving their pieces with calculated precision. And then there's the Gerousia, the Council of Elders, which sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, but is very much real. Comprising 28 elders, men over 60, a respectable age if you've survived the rigors of Spartan life and the 2 kings, this council proposes laws and serves as the city's highest court. Their influence is significant, and their decisions can shape the trajectory of Spartan society. For you, their decrees can mean the difference between prosperity and hardship, depending on how they sway the ephors and kings. So, what's the takeaway from this tangled web of Spartan politics? Well, for starters, the romanticized image of Spartan unity, where everyone marches in lockstep to the beat of military drums, is more of a myth than the Minotaur. Beneath the surface, there's a constant push and pull of power, a dance of diplomacy and dominance that keeps the city-state balanced on the edge of a sword. But let's not forget the economic context here. Sparta's economy, while robust in its own right, is intrinsically linked to its political stability. When the ephors and kings are on the same page, or at least pretending to be, trade flows smoothly and prosperity follows. But when there's discord, it's like a wrench in the gears of a well-oiled phalanx. Trade slows, resources become scarce, and your livelihood hangs in the balance. As an artisan, you're acutely aware of these shifts. Your craft depends on a steady supply of materials, be it clay from the Eurotas River or bronze for your metalwork. When political tensions flare, these resources can become as scarce as a Spartan smile. You find yourself adapting, innovating, and sometimes simply surviving in a world where the winds of politics can change direction without warning. And yet, through it all, there's a resilience that defines both you and Spartan society. The ability to weather storms, to adapt to changing circumstances, is a hallmark of Spartan life. It's a testament to the strength and endurance that's valued so highly here. You, the artisan, embody this spirit, crafting not just goods, but a life that's as intricately woven as any tapestry. So, as you ponder the intricacies of Spartan politics and their impact on your craft, remember this. Even in a society famed for its unity and discipline, the cracks beneath the surface tell a far more nuanced story. It's a tale of power and pragmatism, of art and austerity, where every decision, every decree reverberates through the lives of those who call Sparta home. And tomorrow, when the sun rises over the Tagatus Mountains, you'll return to your workshop, ready to navigate the ever-shifting landscape of Spartan life. You'll continue to craft, to create, to contribute to a world that's as complex and captivating as the pottery you shape. It's a journey that's far from over, a story that's still unfolding, and you, my friend, are right in the middle of it all. As dawn breaks over the rugged Spartan landscape, you, the artisan, are wrapping up your day with a moment of reflection, not unlike the subtle patina settling on a freshly crafted bronze shield. The Spartan way of life, with its emphasis on austerity and discipline, influences every stroke of your chisel, every curve of your pottery. It's a society that romanticizes simplicity yet thrives on complexity. A paradox that's as Spartan as the notorious black broth. Let's dive into the cultural and artistic legacy you're contributing to, shall we? While the world might fixate on the Spartan warriors and their legendary exploits, there's more to the story than spears and shields. The artistic expressions of Sparta, though understated, are as much a testament to endurance as to creativity. Your creations are imbued with practicality, yes, but they also whisper tales of resilience and quiet sophistication. Take pottery, for instance. The Spartan aesthetic leans heavily on functionality, with clean lines and durable forms that reflect the society's values. Yet, there's an artistry in the restraint, a beauty in the balance. The amphorae you craft aren't just vessels, they're a reflection of Spartan life, solid, dependable, and unadorned. But look closer, and you might notice subtle flourishes that hint at the artisan's hand, a nod to the creativity that simmers beneath the surface of Spartan rigidity. In this world, artistic expression is woven into the fabric of daily life, much like the intricate patterns you create on textiles. The Spartan palette might be muted, but the craftsmanship is anything but. Each piece is a study in contrasts, where simplicity meets sophistication and austerity flirts with elegance. It's a bit like watching an ancient Greek drama unfold, where the true depth of the story lies in the nuances, not the spectacle. Speaking of drama, let's consider how modern interpretations often miss the complexities of your world. The lure of the Spartan myth is undeniable. Who wouldn't be captivated by tales of heroism and discipline, where warriors are forged from the fires of adversity? But beneath the legend lies a reality that's as gritty as the clay under your fingernails. The Spartan emphasis on endurance isn't just a military trait, it permeates every aspect of life, including the arts. Yet, in the rush to romanticize the Spartan warrior ethos, the nuances of its artistic legacy often get glossed over. There's a tendency to paint Sparta in broad strokes, focusing on the martial prowess while ignoring the subtleties that define its culture. It's like admiring a well-crafted vase but failing to appreciate the skill and patience required to shape it. The art of Sparta, much like its people, is a study in perseverance, where every creation is a testament to the enduring spirit of its makers. And let's not forget the economic realities that shape your craft. In a society that values strength over opulence, your work is as much about survival as it is about expression. The iron currency, though cumbersome, serves as a constant reminder of the Spartan commitment to resilience. Every transaction, every trade, is a dance between necessity and creativity, where the artisan's touch is vital to the city-state's prosperity. As you contemplate your place in this intricate tapestry, it's clear that the Spartan legacy is one of contrasts, where the stark and the subtle coexist in a delicate balance. The art you create, while seemingly simple, carries the weight of a complex history, one that's as much about endurance as it is about creativity. It's a legacy that challenges the myths, offering a glimpse into the rich tapestry of Spartan life, where the artisan's voice, though often overshadowed by the warriors, is essential to the story. In the end, the tale of Sparta is as much about the artisans as it is about the warriors. It's a narrative woven with threads of discipline and creativity, where each piece, each creation, tells a story of resilience and quiet strength. As you lay down your tools and step back from the day's work, you're not just contributing to a legacy, you're shaping it, one carefully crafted piece at a time. And as the sun sets over the Targetus Mountains, casting long shadows across the Laconian plain, you can't help but feel a profound connection to this ancient world where endurance and creativity dance in a complex, captivating symphony.